Hello, everyone. Tonight, I want to help you let go of the day and ease into rest. I know many of you use these videos to fall asleep, and it means a lot to be part of your nightly routine. So if you haven't already, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. It truly helps. Now, close your eyes, and let's begin. Story 1. Abandoned Farm Truck Graveyard. I'm Robert Chen, Agricultural Transport Specialist. 20 years of hauling grain, livestock feed, and farm equipment across the Great Plains. I know every dirt road, every grain elevator, every family operation from Nebraska to the Dakotas. But there's one place in western Kansas where trucks go to die, and I almost joined them. The discovery happened by accident. I was delivering seed corn to a farm outside Hayes, running late because of equipment delays at the supplier. The GPS showed a farm road shortcut that could save 15 minutes, crucial when you're dealing with planting season deadlines. The shortcut led through typical Kansas countryside, rolling wheat fields, scattered farmsteads, the kind of landscape that stretches endlessly under that massive prairie sky. But after following the dirt road for several miles, I crested a small hill and saw something that stopped me cold. A truck graveyard, hundreds of vehicles scattered across what must have been a 1,000-acre field, arranged in rough rows like some kind of automotive cemetery. Not just any trucks, specifically agricultural haulers, grain trucks, livestock trailers, equipment transporters. All the specialized vehicles that keep rural America running. And they weren't junked or stripped for parts. They looked operational, just abandoned. I pulled over and climbed down to investigate. The nearest truck was a grain hauler similar to mine, maybe 5 years old. The keys were still in the ignition, and when I turned them, the engine started immediately. Fuel gauge showed half full, oil pressure normal, all systems operational. But the driver's seat was covered with a fine layer of dust, and there were spider webs across the windshield. I walked deeper into the graveyard. Row after row of trucks, all in various stages of abandonment, but none actually broken down. Equipment transporters with their precious cargo still chained to the trailers. Livestock haulers with their gates standing open, empty but showing signs of recent use. Every vehicle told the same story, sudden abandonment by drivers who had simply vanished. In the center of the graveyard, I found the oldest section, trucks from the 50s and 60s, their paint faded but their mechanical components still intact. And something else, a small building that looked like a combination office and repair shop. The door was unlocked. Inside, filing cabinets lined the walls, filled with maintenance records going back decades. But these weren't repair logs. They were arrival records. Each file documented when a specific truck had joined the collection, including the driver's name, cargo manifest, and intended destination. The most recent entry was dated 3 days ago. Jimmy Peterson, grain hauler, delivering wheat to Topeka. Truck 347, assigned to row M, space 23. I flipped through more files. Hundreds of drivers over the years, all hauling agricultural goods, all disappearing along with their vehicles. No record of what happened to the drivers themselves, just their trucks, carefully cataloged and assigned parking spaces. A voice behind me said, "Looking for your assignment?" I spun around to find an elderly man in coveralls standing in the doorway. He looked to be in his 70s, with sun-weathered skin and the kind of hands that come from decades of mechanical work. "I'm not staying," I said, "just lost, looking for directions back to the highway." He smiled sadly. "That's what they all say, son, but the thing is, once you find this place, you don't leave. Not in your truck, anyway." "What do you mean?" "This is where agricultural haulers come when their time is up. When the family farms they serve get bought out by corporations. When small-town grain elevators get shuttered. When there's no more work for independent operators." I looked around at the filing cabinet, suddenly understanding. These are all drivers who went out of business, or were about to. The graveyard calls to trucks and drivers who are at the end of their usefulness. Gives them a place to rest with dignity, instead of being scrapped or sold off. But the trucks are all operational. They could still be working. Could be, but would be is a different question. How's your business been lately, son? The question hit harder than it should have. My agricultural transport company had been struggling for 3 years. Family farms consolidating, corporate operations bringing their hauling in-house, competition from larger companies with newer equipment. I was barely making enough to cover fuel and maintenance costs. My truck was paid off, but it was getting older, less fuel efficient. Insurance rates were climbing while freight rates stayed flat. Having some challenges, I admitted. Most drivers who find this place are. The graveyard has a way of calling to those who need it most. He gestured toward the window, where I could see trucks stretching to the horizon. Everyone here served their communities for years, decades even. Delivered the grain that fed families, the seed that grew into next year's crops, the equipment that kept farms running. When their working life ended, they came here instead of ending up in some corporate scrapyard. What happened to the drivers? Different choices for different people. Some found new careers, moved to cities, started over. Others, he trailed off, looking out at the endless rows of vehicles. Others decided to stay, become caretakers of the graveyard, make sure each truck is properly maintained, properly respected. It's peaceful work, and someone needs to do it. I walked back outside, looking at the vast collection with new understanding. These weren't just abandoned vehicles. They were monuments to a way of life that was disappearing. Family farms, small-town businesses, independent operators who had built rural America, one load at a time. My truck sat at the edge of the graveyard, looking small and worn compared to some of the newer vehicles around it. But it had served me well for 12 years, hauling thousands of tons of grain across thousands of miles. "There's a spot waiting for you in row P," the old man said gently. "Space 15, right between a grain hauler from Nebraska and a cattle truck from Oklahoma. Good neighbors." I thought about my dwindling bank account, my aging equipment, my shrinking customer base, the corporate farms that preferred dealing with large fleet operators, the grain elevators that had been bought out and closed. How much longer could I keep operating independently anyway? What if I'm not ready to quit? Then you drive away. No one's keeping you here against your will, but the spot will be waiting when you change your mind. I climbed back into my truck and started the engine. The GPS showed a clear route back to the highway, and from there to the farm where I was supposed to deliver my load of seed corn. But as I drove away from the graveyard, I found myself thinking about row P, space 15, about the peaceful existence of maintaining these monuments to agricultural transportation, about the dignity of ending a career surrounded by others who had traveled the same roads, faced the same challenges. I completed my delivery and drove back to my home base in Nebraska, filed my trip report, paid my bills, scheduled maintenance for next week. But sometimes, when business gets particularly difficult, when another customer switches to a corporate hauler, when the fuel costs eat up another month's profit, I remember that spot in row P of space 15, right between good neighbors who understand the satisfaction of hauling grain across the Great Plains. The graveyard is still there, still accepting new arrivals, still offering dignity to trucks and drivers who have given their best years to feeding America. And sometimes, when the road gets too hard to travel alone, the idea of permanent parking doesn't seem so bad. Story 2, The Creeper at the Diesel Pump. Name's Kelly Martinez, and I've been running night shifts for 8 years. Prefer the quiet roads, the empty truck stops, the solitude that comes with driving while the world sleeps. But there's one guy I keep encountering at diesel pumps across the Southwest, and he's been getting closer each time. First time I saw him was at a Flying J outside Amarillo around 3 a.m. I was fueling up my rig when I noticed someone at the pump across from mine. Tall, thin guy in a baseball cap and dark jacket, standing perfectly still beside his truck. Not pumping fuel, not checking his equipment, just watching. When I glanced over, he turned his head toward me with mechanical precision. Even from 30 feet away, I could feel his stare like a physical weight. Something about his posture, his absolute stillness, sent chills down my spine. I finished fueling as quickly as possible and headed inside to pay. Through the convenience store windows, I watched him. He never moved, never pumped fuel, just stood there beside his truck, facing in my direction. When I came back out, he was gone. The second encounter was 3 weeks later at a pilot station near Flagstaff, same time, around 3 a.m., same setup. I pulled up to the pumps, and there he was, 2 islands over, standing beside what looked like the same truck. This time, I got a better look at him. Mid-50s maybe, average height and build, but something was off about his appearance. His clothes looked wrong, too clean, too perfectly arranged, like a department store mannequin. And his face? Even in the harsh, fluorescent lighting of the fuel island, his features seemed blurry, indistinct. He watched me through the entire fueling process. When I moved, his head tracked my movement with that same mechanical precision. When I stopped, he went perfectly still again. I tried to act normal, but every nerve in my body was screaming that this wasn't a normal situation. Normal people don't stand motionless at fuel pumps for 20 minutes. Normal people don't stare at strangers with that kind of intensity. The third time, he was closer. Love's truck stop outside Albuquerque. 2:47 a.m., according to my dashboard clock. I pulled into the fuel island, and he was already there, not at a distant pump, but right next to mine. Island number 6. While I was at number 5. Our trucks were maybe 15 feet apart. Up close, the wrongness was more obvious. His skin had a waxy quality, like it was made of plastic. His eyes didn't blink, not couldn't blink, but didn't, like he had forgotten that blinking was something humans do. And he smelled wrong. Not bad, exactly, but artificial. Like new car interior mixed with something chemical and unnatural. "Evening," I said, trying to sound casual while every instinct told me to get back in my truck and drive away. He turned his head toward me, that same mechanical movement like he was operated by servos instead of muscles. "Evening, Kelly," he replied in a voice that sounded almost normal, but had an odd echo to it, like he was speaking from the bottom of a well. He knew my name. We'd never been introduced. I'd never spoken to him before, but he knew my name. "Do we know each other?" I asked. "We will," he said. "Soon." I finished fueling in record time, hands shaking as I replaced the nozzle. When I looked back, he was gone again. No sound of a truck starting, no sign of movement. Just empty space where he'd been standing. The pattern continued for months. Different truck stops, different cities, always between 2 and 4 a.m. And he was getting progressively closer each time, sometimes at the next island over, sometimes at the next pump. Once, horrifyingly, at the same island but on the opposite side. Each encounter he seemed more solid, more present. And each time he spoke a little more. "How's the weather tonight, Kelly? Long road ahead? Almost time for our trip together." Our trip together. Those words haunted me for weeks. I started changing my routine, avoiding the major truck stop chains, fueling during daylight hours when possible. But somehow he always found me, like he was tracking my movements, anticipating where I'd stop next. The breakthrough came when I was talking to another driver at a TA in Oklahoma City. Sarah Chen, veteran long hauler who'd been running nights even longer than me. "You ever encounter any unusual people at truck stops?" I asked carefully. Her expression immediately became guarded. "What kind of unusual?" I described the creeper, his appearance, his behavior, the way he seemed to be tracking me across multiple states. Sarah went pale. "Tall guy, waxy skin, doesn't blink?" You've seen him too? Or years ago? Same pattern, started distant, got closer each time. Always knew my name, always talked about us taking a trip together. Huh, what happened? He made his move at a truck stop outside Memphis. Middle of the night, Fuel Island was completely empty except for us. He approached my truck, started tapping on the window with one finger. Tap, tap, tap. Very patient, very persistent. I could picture it perfectly, that mechanical tapping, that patient persistence. What did you do? I called 911, but when the cops arrived, he was gone. And here's the weird part. The security cameras didn't show anyone. According to the footage, I was alone at the Fuel Island the entire time. He doesn't show up on cameras, not on any recording device, but Kelly, she grabbed my arm. After the Memphis incident, he stopped following me, like he'd moved on to someone else. Someone else. The implication was clear. He'd moved on to me. Any idea what he wants? Sarah shook her head. But I heard stories from other drivers, women mostly. Always night shift, always the same pattern. He follows them for months, getting closer, building familiarity. Then he makes his move. What kind of move? That's where the stories get vague. Some say he just disappears after a final encounter. Others claim he convinces drivers to abandon their trucks and go with him voluntarily. And a few what? A few say the drivers disappear entirely. Trucks found empty at truck stops, keys in the ignition, no sign of what happened to the operators. I thought about all those times he'd mentioned our trip together. About how he seemed to know my schedule, my routes, my name. He's not human, is he? I don't think so. Something that looks human, acts almost human, but gets the details wrong. Like something trying to imitate behavior it doesn't really understand. That night, I was more careful than usual about where I stopped for fuel. Chose a busy truck stop with good lighting and plenty of other drivers around. But at 3:17 a.m. when I went out to check my load straps, he was there, standing beside my trailer close enough to touch. "Time for our trip, Kelly," he said in that echoing voice. This close, I could see more details that confirmed Sarah's assessment. His movements were too fluid in some ways, too mechanical in others. His clothes didn't wrinkle or shift naturally, and his shadow fell at the wrong angle, like he was lit by a light source that didn't exist. "I'm not going anywhere with you," I said firmly. "You are," he replied with absolute certainty. "Everyone does, eventually." He reached toward me with one hand, and I saw that his fingers were too long, too flexible, not quite human proportions. I ran back into the truck stop, past other drivers who looked up curiously as I burst through the door. Behind the counter, I called 911 and reported a suspicious person harassing drivers in the parking lot. But when the police arrived, he was gone. And just like Sarah's experience, the security cameras showed nothing. That was 6 months ago. I haven't seen him since Memphis. But sometimes, late at night when I'm fueling up at isolated truck stops, I feel watched. Like something is observing from just outside the range of the security lights, waiting patiently for the right moment to approach. And sometimes when the wind is just right, I catch a whiff of that artificial smell. New car interior mixed with something chemical and wrong. I don't know what the creeper is or where he comes from, but I know he's still out there, following some other night shift driver, getting closer with each encounter, building familiarity until he makes his final approach. If you run nights, especially if you're female, watch for him. Tall, thin, too still posture, mechanical movements. Doesn't blink, doesn't show up on cameras, knows more about you than he should. And if he starts talking about taking a trip together, don't wait to find out what he means. Because some passengers on the night shift aren't looking for rides to anywhere you'd want to go. Story 3. Truck Stop Bathroom Screams. I'm Dave Patterson, been running cross-country for 16 years. You spend that much time on the road, truck stop bathrooms become a necessary evil, places you visit quickly and try not to think about too much. But the facilities at mile marker 127 on 880 in Nebraska changed my entire perspective on what those rooms might contain. It started as a routine fuel stop around midnight. I was hauling electronics from California to Chicago, making good time on empty highways under a moonless sky. The truck stop looked standard, decent lighting, clean exterior, the kind of place that caters to professional drivers rather than just highway tourists. Inside, everything seemed normal. Well-stocked convenience store, friendly clerk, fresh coffee, and hot food under the warming lamps. I grabbed a sandwich and headed for the restroom facilities. The bathroom was at the back of the building, down a short hallway that felt oddly isolated from the main store area. Clean tile floors, fluorescent lighting, standard truck stop setup, nothing unusual about it, until I heard the screaming. It came from one of the stalls, a sound of pure terror and agony that made my blood freeze. Not yelling, not anger, but genuine screaming like someone was being tortured, the kind of sound that triggers every protective instinct you have. "Hey," I called out, "you okay in there?" The screaming stopped immediately. Complete silence, so absolute it felt unnatural. "Sir, do you need help?" No response. I could see feet under the stall door, work boots, jeans. Definitely someone in there, but whoever it was had gone completely silent. I knocked on the stall door. "I'm going to call for help if you don't answer." Still nothing. The feet under the door shifted slightly, but the person didn't speak or make any other sound. It felt like someone was hiding, waiting for me to leave. I backed away and went to find the store clerk, a middle-aged woman who looked like she'd been working truck stops for decades. "There's someone in your bathroom who might need medical attention," I told her. "I heard screaming." Her expression changed immediately, becoming guarded and uncomfortable. "Patient bathroom screaming?" she asked quietly. "Yeah, from one of the stalls. Sounded like someone was in serious trouble." She sighed and came around the counter. "I'll check it out." We walked back to the bathroom together, but when we got there, it was empty. All the stall doors standing open, no one inside, no sign that anyone had been there recently. "I must have left while you were getting me," she said, but her tone suggested she didn't believe it any more than I did. "This happen often?" She looked around nervously, like she was worried about being overheard. "Not often, maybe once or twice a month. Drivers report hearing screaming from the bathrooms, but when we check, there's never anyone there." "Any idea what causes it?" "Management says it's acoustics. Sound carrying from other parts of the building creating echoes that sound like voices. But the sound is always the same. Same type of scream, same duration, same intensity. If it was random acoustic effects, wouldn't there be more variation?" I thought about what I'd heard, that unmistakable sound of genuine terror. The sudden silence when I'd responded. "Have you ever heard it yourself?" She nodded reluctantly. "Third shift, about 2 years ago. Heard screaming from the men's room, went to investigate, found it empty. But the weird part was, the sound seemed to come from inside the walls, like someone was trapped in the plumbing or ventilation system. Inside the walls, that was a disturbing thought. I completed my business quickly and returned to my truck, but the incident stayed with me. Over the next few months, I made it a point to stop at that same truck stop whenever my route took me through Nebraska. Most visits were normal, standard bathroom breaks, no unusual sounds, no other incidents. But on my fourth visit, around 2 a.m. on a foggy October night, I heard it again. This time, I was prepared. I had my phone ready to record, and I approached the bathroom with more caution. The screaming was coming from the last stall, just like before, but now I could hear something else underneath the sound, a rhythmic tapping like someone knocking desperately on pipes or walls. Tap, 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 scream, tap, 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 scream. A pattern like someone was trying to communicate. I pulled out my phone and started recording, but the moment I activated the camera, everything went silent. No screaming, no tapping, just the hum of ventilation fans. I played back the recording. Nothing but ambient bathroom sounds. "Hello," I called out. "I heard you. If you need help, I can call someone." The tapping resumed. 3 quick taps. Pause. 3 more taps. Universal SOS signal. But when I looked under the stall door, I saw something that made my skin crawl. The work boots were there, just like before, but they were positioned wrong, angled in a way that suggested the person wearing them was sitting facing the back wall of the stall, instead of facing forward, like they were stuck somehow, unable to turn around. "Sir, can you move? Are you trapped?" 3 more taps. Definitely SOS. I tried pushing on the stall door, but it was locked from the inside. The gap between the door and the frame was too narrow to see through, and the person inside wasn't responding to verbal communication. This time, I called 911. 911, what's your emergency? I'm at a truck stop on I-80, mile marker 127. There's someone trapped in a bathroom stall who's been signaling for help. Trapped how? I'm not sure. They can't speak, but they're tapping SOS on the walls. The stall is locked from inside, and I can't get them to respond verbally. The dispatcher sent a fire department rescue unit and a state trooper. While I waited, I kept vigil outside the bathroom door, listening to the periodic tapping that confirmed someone was still there. When the first responders arrived, we approached the stall together. The fire chief knocked on the door and identified himself, explaining that they were there to help. No response, no tapping. They broke open the stall door. Empty. No one inside, no sign that anyone had been there. The boots I'd seen under the door were gone. "You sure there was someone in here?" the trooper asked. "I saw feet under the door. Heard tapping. Someone was definitely in this stall." The fire chief checked the walls and plumbing, looking for any way someone could have disappeared or become trapped inside the structure itself. Nothing. Standard bathroom construction, no hidden spaces or unusual configurations. After they left, I talked to the night clerk, a different woman from my previous visits. "Ever hear about people getting trapped in the bathroom?" I asked. "Trapped? No. But we do get reports of screaming sometimes. Management thinks it's acoustic problems." "What do you think?" She looked around the store, making sure no customers were within earshot. "I think something bad happened in that bathroom. Maybe years ago, maybe decades, and sometimes when conditions are right, it replays." "Replays?" "Like an echo that got stuck in the walls. Same sounds, same sequence, same desperate attempt to get help." I thought about the positioning of those boots, the mechanical repetition of the SOS tapping, the way everything stopped when I tried to record it. "You think someone died in there?" "I think someone died in there asking for help that never came, and now they're still asking. I've stopped at that truck stop a dozen more times since then. Sometimes the bathroom is completely normal, but on certain nights, always late, always when the weather is strange, I hear the screaming and tapping from that last stall. I don't investigate anymore. I use the facilities quickly and leave. Because some sounds aren't meant for the living to hear. They're echoes from moments when help was needed but never arrived, trapped in tile and plumbing like audio recordings that play on infinite loop. The bathroom at mile marker 127 remembers something terrible, and sometimes when the conditions are just right, it shares that memory with anyone willing to listen. But listening doesn't mean you can help. Some screams come from too far in the past to answer. All you can do is bear witness and hope that whoever's making those sounds has finally found peace. Even if they're still asking for help, that will never come. Story 4. Haunting in the Shower Stall. I'm Linda Thompson, 24 years running refrigerated goods coast to coast. When you spend that much time on the road, truck stop showers become essential, those brief moments of cleanliness and normalcy that make the highway lifestyle bearable. But Shower 7 at the Grand Junction Travel Center taught me that some facilities offer more than just hot water and privacy. I'd been driving for 18 hours straight, hauling frozen foods from Phoenix to Denver through summer heat that made my refrigeration unit work overtime. By the time I reached Grand Junction, I was exhausted, dehydrated, and desperately needed both fuel and a shower before tackling the mountain pass ahead. The travel center was busy despite the 1 a.m. hour typical for a major truck route. Inside, the shower attendant was a pleasant older woman who handed me towels and directed me to shower 7. "That one's just been cleaned," she said. "Nice and fresh." The shower facility looked standard. Individual stalls with locking doors, each containing a toilet, sink, and shower. Clean white tiles, good water pressure. The kind of setup that caters to professional drivers who appreciate functional amenities. I locked the door, started the water, and began my routine. But within the first few minutes, I noticed something unusual about the acoustics. Every sound seemed amplified and distorted. The water hitting the tile sounded like rain on a metal roof, and my own movements echoed strangely in the small space. Then I heard the singing, a woman's voice, soft and melodic, coming from somewhere nearby. At first I assumed it was another driver in an adjacent shower stall, but the song was too clear, too intimate, like the singer was right there with me. The melody was beautiful but haunting, something that sounded vaguely familiar, but not quite identifiable, and the voice had an ethereal quality that made it seem to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. I paused my shower to listen more carefully. The singing continued, getting slightly louder, as if the performer was becoming more confident. The lyrics were just beyond comprehension. Words that sounded like English, but didn't quite form recognizable sentences. "Hello?" I called out softly. "Someone there?" The singing stopped immediately. I waited, listening to the sound of running water and ventilation fans. After a few moments, I resumed my shower, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. That's when I saw her in the mirror. Not clearly, just a reflection that shouldn't have been there, standing behind me in a space that I knew was empty. Female figure, indistinct but definitely present, with long hair and what looked like an old-fashioned dress. I spun around, but the shower stall was empty. When I looked back at the mirror, the reflection was gone. I finished my shower quickly, more unsettled than frightened, but definitely ready to get back to my truck. But as I was drying off, the singing resumed, closer now, more personal, like someone was serenading me, specifically. This time, I could make out some of the words. Lonely road, lonely night. Travelers seeking comfort's light. Rest here, stay here. Let me wash your fears away. The lyrics sent chills down my spine. Not threatening exactly, but intensely intimate in a way that felt inappropriate for a truck stop shower. I dressed quickly and unlocked the door, but before leaving, I took one last look at the mirror. For just a moment, I could swear I saw that female figure again. Not threatening, but sad somehow, like she was sorry to see me go. Outside the shower stall, I approached the attendant. "Shower 7 has some interesting acoustics," I said carefully. Her expression immediately became guarded. "Acoustics?" I heard singing, very clear, like someone was right there with me. She sighed and looked around the facility to make sure no other customers were within earshot. "You heard her too." "Maria. She used to work here. Long time ago." "Used to work here?" "Shower attendant like me. But she had problems, personal stuff. Husband left her, kids moved away, money troubles. She was living in her car toward the end, using the employee shower facilities to stay clean." I could see where the story was heading, but I let her continue. "A night about 5 years ago, she was found in shower 7. Overdose. Pills and alcohol. They think she'd been in there for hours before anyone checked." "And now drivers hear singing?" "Not all drivers. Seems to be mainly women traveling alone, especially late at night. Maria always worried about female truckers, said the road was too dangerous for women by themselves." I thought about the lyrics I'd heard. Let me wash your fears away. She's trying to take care of people? That's what I think, offering comfort to travelers who need it most. The singing it's beautiful, isn't it? Peaceful? It had been beautiful, haunting and sad, but genuinely lovely. Does she ever interact with people beyond just singing? Sometimes drivers report seeing a woman in the mirror or feeling like someone's helping them, finding soap they forgot to bring, towels appearing when theirs fall on the floor, small kindnesses. I remembered that reflection behind me, the sense of being watched but not threatened. Is she safe to be around? Safe. She's the safest thing about this place. Maria loved taking care of people when she was alive, and death didn't change that. If anything, she's more protective now. Over the following months, I made sure to route through Grand Junction whenever possible. Each time, I requested Shower 7, and each time, Maria sang for me. The songs were always different, sometimes melancholy ballads about life on the road, sometimes lullabies that reminded me of my mother's voice, occasionally upbeat tunes that felt like encouragement for the miles ahead. And gradually I began to see her more clearly, not solid, but present, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and gentle hands, wearing what looked like a travel center uniform from years past. She never spoke directly, never tried to communicate beyond the singing, but her presence was comforting in a way that's hard to describe, like having a guardian angel who understood the specific challenges of life on the highway. Once, when I was having mechanical troubles with my refrigeration unit and was stressed about potentially losing a valuable load, her singing became more insistent, more urgent. The melody seemed to pull me toward the mirror, where she stood pointing at something behind me. I turned to look and saw that the shower stall's electrical outlet was sparking, a fire hazard I hadn't noticed. Her warning probably saved both my life and the building. Another time, when I was fighting a severe case of flu but couldn't afford to miss deliveries, her songs became lullabies that helped me sleep better than I had in weeks. When I woke, I found extra towels arranged around me like blankets, and someone had left aspirin and cough drops on the sink counter. The staff insisted they hadn't been there when I'd arrived. I told other female drivers about Maria, and several began requesting Shower 7 when they stopped in Grand Junction. All reported similar experiences, protective presence, beautiful singing, small acts of kindness that made the harsh realities of highway life a little more bearable. Maria had found her purpose in death that she'd never quite achieved in life, taking care of travelers who needed comfort and protection. The shower stall had become her permanent route, her way of continuing to serve the trucking community that had been her chosen family. Truck stop facilities aren't usually places where you expect to encounter beauty or gentleness. They're functional spaces designed for efficiency and hygiene, not comfort or emotional support. But Shower 7 at the Grand Junction Travel Center is different. It's a place where a lonely woman's spirit continues her mission of caring for others, offering songs and small kindnesses to drivers who need reminding that they're not traveling the endless highways alone. If you ever find yourself there late at night, listen for the singing. Let Maria wash your road weariness away with melodies that understand the weight of miles and the comfort of human connection. She's not scary. She's exactly what every long-haul trucker needs, someone who cares whether you make it safely to your destination. Even if that someone exists in the space between life and whatever comes after, still wearing her work uniform and tending to travelers who need more than just hot water and clean towels. Some hauntings aren't about terror. They're about love that couldn't be stopped by something as minor as death. Story 5. No GPS signal in Murder Alley. I'm Tony Ricci, independent trucker specializing in time-sensitive deliveries across the eastern seaboard. Been hauling freight for 19 years, know every shortcut and back road from Boston to Atlanta. That knowledge saved me time and money until it led me down County Road 47 in rural Virginia. The locals call it Murder Alley. Was running pharmaceutical supplies from Richmond to Charlotte, racing against a delivery window that would cost me a hefty penalty if I missed it. Construction delays on I-95 had eaten into my schedule, so when my GPS showed a shortcut through the Virginia backcountry, I took it without hesitation. County Road 47 looked like any other rural route, 2 lanes of cracked asphalt cutting through dense forests and farmland. But within the first few miles, something felt wrong about the place. The GPS signal cut out completely. Not just weak reception, total blackout, like I was driving through a dead zone. My cell phone showed no bars, and even my CB radio couldn't pick up any traffic. Isolated doesn't begin to describe it. The trees pressed close to the road, creating a tunnel of overhanging branches that blocked out most of the afternoon sun. Between the thick canopy and gathering storm clouds, it felt more like dusk than 3 p.m. That's when I started noticing the cars. They were parked along the shoulders at irregular intervals, maybe one every mile or so. Old vehicles mostly, rusted and weathered, sitting empty in the shadows like automotive tombstones. Some had flat tires, others were missing windows or doors. All looked like they'd been abandoned for years. But their positions bothered me. Each car was angled slightly toward the road, as if whoever had left them there wanted to watch passing traffic. I slowed down to get a better look at one, a faded blue sedan from the 80s, rear bumper nearly touching the asphalt. The driver's door hung open, and I could see into the interior. Empty, but the seat was adjusted for someone much taller than average. In the rearview mirror, I caught a glimpse of movement near another abandoned car. Just a shadow shifting between the trees, but it looked almost human-shaped. My skin started crawling. The road began to curve more frequently, winding through hills covered in thick undergrowth. More abandoned vehicles appeared. Pickup trucks, station wagons, even an old delivery van similar to mine, all positioned like silent sentries, watching over this forgotten stretch of asphalt. Around mile marker 23, I saw the first house. It sat maybe 50 yards back from the road, a ramshackle farmhouse with boarded windows and a collapsing porch. Should have looked completely abandoned, but smoke was rising from the chimney. Someone was home. As I passed, I could swear I saw a figure standing in one of the upstairs windows. Too far away to make out details, but they seemed to be watching my truck with intense focus. The CB radio crackled to life. "Eastbound truck on County 47. This is Road Watch. You copy?" I grabbed the mic. "This is eastbound. Go ahead, Road Watch. You need to turn around. Now. This road ain't safe for truckers." What kind of unsafe? Long pause, filled with static. Then, the kind where trucks go in, but they don't come out. I looked ahead. The road stretched into deeper forest, more curves, more shadows. Behind me, the route back to the interstate seemed impossibly far. "Road Watch, what's your location?" "I'm watching from the trees. Been watching this road for 7 years, trying to warn drivers before it's too late." Before words too late, before you become part of the collection. Election. The word made my hands tighten on the steering wheel. All those abandoned cars along the roadside, were they part of someone's collection? "Turn around," the voice urged. "Don't go past mile marker 30. That's where the real trouble starts." Mile marker 29 appeared in my headlights. Against every instinct, I pressed the accelerator instead of hitting the brakes. I needed to know what was ahead. What had trapped all those other drivers? Mile marker 30 came and went. The forest changed. The trees were older here, more gnarled, with branches that seemed to reach toward the road like arthritic fingers. The abandoned vehicles became more frequent, dozens of them now, forming an automotive graveyard that stretched as far as I could see. And they weren't all old anymore. I passed a Prius that couldn't have been more than a few years old, a pickup truck with current license plates, a delivery van with fresh corporate decals still bright on the sides. Recent additions to the collection. The CB radio crackled again, but now the voice sounded different. Multiple voices, actually, speaking in overlapping whispers. "Welcome to Murder Alley. You can check out, but you can't leave. Join the collection truck or join us forever." I tried to respond, but the radio was transmitting voices I wasn't speaking. My own voice pleading, "Please, somebody help me. I've been driving this road for days and I can't find the exit." That wasn't me talking, but it was my voice, unmistakably. The road ahead split into a Y intersection. No signs indicating which way led out, which led deeper into whatever trap this place had become. Both roads disappeared into dense forest that looked exactly the same. I chose left. Wrong choice. The road began to loop back on itself, making wide curves that should have taken me in a different direction, but somehow brought me past the same landmarks. The same abandoned cars, the same decrepit farmhouse with smoke rising from its chimney. But now there were more vehicles, including, impossibly, a truck that looked exactly like mine parked beside the blue sedan I'd seen earlier. I stopped and got out to investigate. It was my truck, same company logos, same license plate, same cargo configuration, but the cab was empty, door hanging open like the driver had simply vanished mid-journey. Or like the driver was still walking around somewhere, looking for a way out of Murder Alley. Behind me I heard the rumble of a diesel engine. I turned to see another truck approaching, identical to mine in every detail. As it passed, I caught a glimpse of the driver. It was me. Same face, same company uniform, same expression of growing panic I could feel on my own features. The other me was gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles, staring straight ahead, like he was afraid to look at anything else. I climbed back into my real truck and continued driving, but now I understood what was happening. County Road 47 wasn't just a shortcut through rural Virginia. It was a trap designed to collect vehicles and drivers, adding them to an ever-growing fleet of ghost traffic that would circle these roads forever. The voices on the CB radio were other truckers who had taken the same route, made the same mistake. Some had been driving Murder Alley for days, others for years, all looking for an exit that didn't exist. But I had one advantage they hadn't. I knew I was trapped. The first step to escaping any trap is recognizing that you're in one. The second step is refusing to accept that escape is impossible. I began paying closer attention to the details. The mile markers, the positioning of abandoned vehicles, the exact sequence of curves and intersections. Murder Alley was designed to feel random, chaotic, but underneath the confusion was a pattern. After my fifth loop through the same section, I found it. Between mile markers 31 and 32, there was a gap in the tree line, so narrow I'd missed it 4 times. Not a proper road, just a dirt track, barely wide enough for a truck. But it led away from the main route, heading toward what looked like normal countryside. I took the gap. The track was rough, forcing me to crawl in first gear. Branches scraped against my trailer, and more than once I thought I might get stuck. But after 20 minutes of careful navigation, I emerged onto a paved county road that I recognized from my maps. Real road, real mile markers, and when I checked my GPS, the signal came back immediately. I was free, but in my rearview mirror, I could see the entrance to that narrow dirt track, and sometimes, late at night, when I'm driving through rural areas, I tune my CB radio to unusual frequencies and listen to the voices. Day 43 on counting 47. Still looking for the exit. Been circling Murder Alley for 2 years now. Starting to forget what the outside world looks like. If anyone receives this transmission, don't take the shortcut through Virginia backcountry. The GPS is lying. I never respond to those transmissions, but I always listen just in case one of those trapped drivers finds the courage to look for the gap between mile markers 31 and 32. Because some roads are designed to collect travelers, the way spider webs collect flies. And once you're caught in their pattern, escape requires more than just good navigation skills. It requires recognizing that not all shortcuts lead where they claim to go. Some lead to collections that are always looking for new additions. Story 6. Gravel Road to Hell. The name's Rachel Brooks, and I've been running produce from farms to distribution centers across the rural South for 14 years. Know every dirt road, farm lane, and forgotten highway from Georgia to Tennessee. But there's one gravel road in eastern Alabama that I'll never drive again, no matter how much time it might save. I was hauling a load of peaches from Chilton County to Atlanta, running behind schedule due to mechanical delays. The fruit was getting ripe, and every hour of delay meant potential spoilage and lost revenue. When my GPS suggested a shortcut through backwoods Alabama, a gravel road that could cut 40 minutes off my route, I took it without hesitation. Biggest mistake of my life. The road started innocent enough, well-maintained gravel cutting through pine forest and abandoned farmland, but within the first few miles, I started noticing things that didn't feel right about the place. The trees were wrong. Not diseased or dead, but somehow too perfect, too uniformly spaced, like someone had planted them in precise rows, creating an artificial forest designed to look natural, but failing at the details. The road surface was too smooth for gravel. No potholes, no washouts, no variation in grade or texture. It felt more like driving on concrete painted to look like crushed stone. And the silence was absolute. No birds, no insects, no wind through the trees. Just the rumble of my engine and the crunch of tires on gravel that didn't sound quite right. After about 10 miles, I saw the first sign. Hand-painted on weathered plywood, stuck in the ground beside the road, "Welcome to Perdition. Population variable." Population variable. What kind of town has a variable population? More signs appeared as I drove deeper into the forest. Perdition city limits, drive carefully, eternity is forever. Now leaving Perdition, thanks for visiting hell. Perdition Municipal Cemetery, permanent residents welcome. The signs were clearly meant to be funny, playing on the town's unfortunate name, but something about them felt genuinely menacing, like warnings disguised as jokes. Around mile 15, I reached the town itself. Perdition looked like it had been frozen in time around 1950. Main Street lined with old-fashioned storefronts, vintage cars parked at perfect angles, streetlights that belonged in a Norman Rockwell painting, but despite the picture-perfect appearance, something fundamental was wrong with the place. There were no people. Every building looked occupied, lights on in windows, open signs hanging in shop doors, fresh merchandise visible through storefront glass. But the sidewalks were empty, and I couldn't see anyone moving inside the buildings. I slowed down, looking for signs of life. The barber shop had a customer's cape draped over the chair, like someone had just stepped away mid-haircut. The diner had plates of food sitting on tables, steam still rising from coffee cups. The gas station had a car at the pump with the nozzle inserted, as if someone had started fueling and then vanished. It felt like everyone in town had simply disappeared moments before I arrived. At the far end of Main Street, the gravel road continued into more forest. A sign read, "Perdition, thanks for stopping by, come back soon." But as I was leaving town, I glanced in my rearview mirror and saw something that made my blood freeze. People were emerging from the buildings. Dozens of them, stepping out of shops and doorways, all turning to watch my truck disappear into the forest. Too far away to make out their faces, but there was something wrong with how they moved. Too synchronized, like they were all responding to the same signal. I pressed harder on the accelerator. The forest on the far side of Perdition was different from what I'd driven through before. Darker, more overgrown, with trees that seemed to lean inward over the road. And the gravel had changed too. Now it looked red, like it was mixed with rust or clay, or blood. Mile after mile, the road continued through increasingly hostile landscape. The trees became more twisted, their branches forming shapes that looked almost like faces or grasping hands. The red gravel crunched under my tires with sounds that resembled whispers or distant screams. My CB radio began picking up transmissions. "Welcome to hell, trucker. Hope you brought your sunscreen. Population of Perdition just went up by 1. Congratulations on your permanent residency. Rachel Brooks, hauling peaches to Atlanta. We've been expecting you." They knew my name, they knew my cargo and destination. Information that should have been impossible for random radio operators to possess. "Who is this?" I demanded into the microphone. Laughter filled the channel, multiple voices laughing in perfect unison, creating a sound like distant thunder or grinding machinery. "We're the welcoming committee," a voice said. "Perdition takes pride in customer service." The road began to slope downward, descending into what looked like a natural depression in the landscape. But as I drove deeper, I realized it wasn't natural at all. The depression was perfectly circular, with the gravel road spiraling down its sides like a ramp leading into some kind of enormous pit. At the bottom, barely visible in the growing darkness, I could see lights. Not the warm yellow glow of electric bulbs, but something red and flickering, like firelight or molten metal. The voices on the radio became more urgent. "Come on down, Rachel. The real perdition is waiting for you. Don't fight it. Everyone ends up here eventually. Your peaches will make excellent fuel for the fires." Fuel for the fires. I looked back at my trailer full of fresh fruit, suddenly understanding why I'd been directed down this particular road. The peaches weren't just cargo, they were an offering, tribute for whatever was waiting at the bottom of this artificial canyon. I slammed on the brakes. The truck skidded on the red gravel, air brakes hissing as I fought to stop my descent into whatever hell was waiting below. But the road surface was slick, almost oily, and I continued sliding downward despite maximum braking. That's when I remembered my emergency procedures training. Sometimes the only way to stop a runaway truck is to use the environment itself as a brake. I steered toward the embankment, letting my trailer scrape against the rocky wall of the pit. Sparks flew, metal shrieked against stone, but the friction began to slow my descent. 20 yards from the bottom, I managed to stop. Below me I could see the real perdition. Not a quaint small town, but a sprawling complex of industrial buildings glowing with internal fires. Smokestacks belched red flame into the sky, and conveyor belts moved loads of what looked like produce and other organic materials into massive furnaces. This was where lost shipments ended up, where drivers who took the wrong shortcuts delivered their cargo to buyers who existed in the spaces between the living world and whatever comes after. I threw the truck in reverse and began backing up the spiral road. It should have been impossible. The grade was too steep, the surface too slick, but somehow the truck climbed steadily upward, like something was helping me escape, or like something down below wanted me to leave and spread the word about what I'd seen. At the top of the pit, I didn't stop to rest or check for damage. I drove straight through perdition at maximum speed, not looking at the buildings or the people who might have been watching from the windows. The forest on the other side seemed to stretch forever, but eventually I reached paved road and normal countryside. My GPS signal returned and I was able to navigate back to major highways. I delivered my peaches to Atlanta, filed a routine trip report, and never mentioned the gravel road or the town called Perdition. Who would believe such a story? But sometimes, late at night when I'm driving through rural areas, I see signs for shortcuts through unfamiliar territory, gravel roads that promise to save time and money, leading through forests that look just a little too perfect. I don't take those shortcuts anymore, because some roads lead to destinations that aren't marked on any legitimate map, places where cargo gets delivered to buyers who pay in currencies more valuable than money. And some towns really do live up to their names, no matter how much they try to disguise themselves as harmless rural communities. The gravel road to hell is paved with good intentions and time-sensitively deliveries, but it's still hell no matter how friendly the welcome signs might be. Story 7. Wrong turn into a ghost town. I'm Marcus Thompson, heavy equipment transport specialist. Been moving construction machinery and industrial equipment for 26 years, mainly through the Southwest and Mountain West. Know every route, every way station, every low bridge from Texas to Montana. That knowledge failed me completely when I took the wrong exit outside Flagstaff and found myself in Cedar Hollow. I was hauling a massive excavator from Phoenix to a mining operation in Colorado, running a permitted oversized load that required specific routing and escort vehicles. But somewhere near Flagstaff, road construction forced a detour that wasn't in my trip plan. The flagman directed me off I-40 onto what looked like a standard alternate route, well-marked signs indicating detour, all trucks follow, but after following the detour signs for 30 minutes through increasingly remote terrain, I realized I hadn't seen any other traffic in over an hour. No other trucks, no passenger cars, no signs of the construction work that had supposedly necessitated the detour. The road led through high desert country, winding between red rock formations and scattered juniper trees. Beautiful landscape, but completely empty of human activity. My CB radio picked up nothing but static, and my cell phone showed no signal bars. That's when I saw the sign. Cedar Hollow, population 847, founded 1882. A great place to live. The town sat in a valley between two mesas, looking like something from an old Western movie. Main Street lined with original brick buildings, wooden sidewalks, even hitching posts in front of some establishments. Classic frontier architecture, perfectly preserved. Too perfectly preserved. I drove slowly down Main Street looking for anyone who could give me directions back to the interstate, but despite the population 847 sign, Cedar Hollow appeared to be completely deserted. Every building looked operational, fresh paint, clean windows, well-maintained facades. The general store had merchandise displayed in its windows. The saloon had signs advertising cold beer, hot food. The hotel had a vacancy sign hanging from its covered porch. But there were no people anywhere. I parked my rig in front of the town hall and climbed down to investigate. The silence was absolute. No traffic sounds, no machinery, no voices or footsteps. Just the whisper of wind through the narrow streets, and the distant cry of a hawk circling overhead. The general store door was unlocked. Inside, it looked like a museum display of frontier commerce, shelves stocked with period-appropriate goods, cast-iron cookware, bolts of fabric, even penny candy in glass jars. But everything was covered with a fine layer of dust, like it had been sitting undisturbed for decades. A handwritten sign by the cash register read, "Back in 10 minutes. Help yourself. Leave money on counter. Trust system." The date on the sign was yesterday. I checked the hotel next. The lobby was furnished with authentic Victorian pieces, and a guest register sat open on the front desk. The last entry was dated 3 days ago. J. Mitchell, traveling salesman, room 12. I climbed the stairs to check room 12. The door was unlocked, and inside I found a traveling salesman's sample cases arranged neatly on the bed. Contemporary cases filled with modern electronics and computer components. Someone had been here recently, someone real, staying in a hotel that looked like it belonged in the 1880, but was clearly still operating in the present day. Back on Main Street, I noticed details I'd missed before. Modern utilities ran to each building, electric lines, phone cables, even what looked like fiber optic installations. The street lamps were styled to look like gas fixtures, but they were actually electric. The hitching posts had modern bike racks built into them. Cedar Hollow wasn't a preserved ghost town or historical recreation. It was a fully functional modern community that had chosen to maintain a 19th century appearance. But where was everyone? I tried shouting, "Hello? Anyone here? I need directions." My voice echoed off the building facades and faded into the desert silence. But as the echo died away, I heard something else. The faint sound of voices coming from somewhere deeper in town. I followed the sound to a large building at the end of Main Street. The sign read, Cedar Hollow Community Center, all welcome. Through the windows, I could see lights and movement inside. The front door was unlocked. Inside, I found them, all 847 residents of Cedar Hollow, gathered in what looked like a town meeting. Men, women, children, all dressed in period-appropriate frontier clothing, but carrying modern devices like smartphones and tablets. They turned to look at me as I entered, and the room fell completely silent. "Excuse me," I said, feeling awkward but desperate for directions. "I'm a truck driver, got detoured off the interstate. Can someone tell me how to get back to I-40? An elderly man in a black suit and string tie stood up from the front row. "Welcome to Cedar Hollow, Mr. Thompson. We've been waiting for you." He knew my name, just like in every other strange encounter I'd had over the years. Somehow, they already knew who I was. "Waiting for me?" "Your load," he said, gesturing toward a large screen at the front of the room. "That excavator you're hauling, we have a buyer for it." The screen showed detailed specifications for my cargo, make, model, serial numbers, even the purchase price. Information that should have been confidential to the shipping company. "I'm sorry, but this equipment is already sold. I'm delivering it to a mining operation in Colorado." The old man smiled. "Are you? Check your bills of lading." I pulled out my paperwork. The delivery address had changed. Instead of the Colorado mine, it now showed an address in Cedar Hollow. This exact building. How is that possible? Cedar Hollow exists in the spaces between destinations, the old man explained. Sometimes shipments get redirected to where they're really needed. I looked around the room at the 847 residents, all watching me with patient, expectant expressions. They weren't hostile, but there was something unsettling about their collective focus. "What do you need with heavy construction equipment?" "We're expanding," he said simply. "Cedar Hollow has been the same size since 1882. Time to grow." One of the women in the front row stood up. "The thing is, Mr. Thompson, deliveries to Cedar Hollow are one-way trips. Drivers who find us tend to stay. Stay? Become residents. We're always looking for new community members, especially those with useful skills. Transportation expertise would be very valuable here." I backed toward the door. "I appreciate the offer, but I need to get back to my regular routes." "Do you?" the old man asked. "What's really waiting for you out there? Another load? Another endless highway? Another lonely night in a truck stop?" He wasn't wrong. My life on the road was exactly that. An endless cycle of pickups and deliveries, with no real home or community to anchor me. "Here, you'd be part of something permanent," he continued. "A place where people know your name, where your skills matter, where you'd never be just another anonymous driver." The offer was tempting. More tempting than it should have been. But something about the situation felt wrong. The way everyone watched me so intently, the way my paperwork had changed, the way Cedar Hollow seemed to exist outside normal geography and time. "I need to think about it," I said. "Of course, take your time. Your truck will be here when you're ready to decide." I hurried outside, but when I reached the spot where I'd parked, my rig was gone. Not stolen, moved. I could see it parked behind the community center, positioned next to a loading dock where several residents were already beginning to unchain the excavator from the trailer. "Looking for your truck?" I turned to find the old man standing behind me. "The thing about Cedar Hollow," he said, "is that once something arrives here, it tends to stay. Trucks, cargo, drivers, we take good care of everything." Behind him, more residents were emerging from buildings along Main Street, not threatening, but definitely surrounding me. All still wearing their frontier costumes, all carrying modern devices that somehow looked perfectly natural in their hands. "Population 848 now," one of them said cheerfully. I ran, not toward my truck that was clearly beyond reach, but toward the edge of town, hoping to find the road I'd come in on. But Cedar Hollow seemed to have changed configuration while I was in the community center. The streets formed a maze now, curving back on themselves, leading me in circles through increasingly unfamiliar neighborhoods. Victorian houses mixed with adobe structures, mixed with buildings that looked like they belonged in completely different time periods. And everywhere, residents watched from windows and doorways, all wearing the same patient, welcoming expressions. After an hour of running, I found myself back on Main Street, exhausted and completely disoriented. The old man was waiting for me. Population 848, he repeated. Welcome home, Marcus. I don't know how long I've been in Cedar Hollow now. Time moves differently here, and the frontier-style calendar in my assigned room doesn't match any dating system I recognize. The residents are kind, the work is satisfying, and there's a genuine sense of community that I never found on the road. My truck is well maintained, and I use it for local deliveries between Cedar Hollow and other settlements that exist in the spaces between mapped territories. But sometimes, late at night, I tune my CB radio to emergency frequencies and listen to the familiar chatter of long-haul truckers reporting their positions on highways I remember driving. And sometimes, very quietly, I broadcast my own message. This is Marcus Thompson, CDL number 4,847,291. If you're ever offered a detour near Flagstaff that leads to Cedar Hollow, think carefully about whether you're ready to become a permanent resident. Population is always variable here, but it never goes down. Story 8, Endless Loop on County Road 44. I'm Jennifer Walsh, livestock transport specialist. Been hauling cattle, horses, and pigs across the Midwest for 22 years. Know every farm road, every livestock auction, every processing facility from Kansas to Ohio. But County Road 44 in southern Illinois taught me that some roads don't lead to destinations, they lead to themselves. I was moving a load of cattle from a ranch outside Springfield to a feedlot in Indiana, running late due to processing delays at the origin. The animals were getting restless and I needed to make up time without stressing them further. When my GPS showed a shortcut through rural Illinois that could save 40 minutes, I took it. County Road 44 started normal enough. 2-lane blacktop cutting through cornfields and pasture land. Typical Midwest agricultural country, flat and endless under a gray October sky. But after the first few miles, I started noticing that the landscape wasn't changing. Same red barn with the faded mail pouch advertisement on its side. Same cluster of grain silos at mile marker 7. Same abandoned gas station with the rusted shell sign hanging at an angle. I'd been driving for 30 minutes, but the scenery remained identical to what I'd seen in the first 10 minutes. At first I assumed it was just the monotony of Midwest farmland. Everything looks similar when you're surrounded by endless cornfields. But when I passed the same red barn for the 5th time, I knew something was wrong. I pulled over and checked my GPS. According to the satellite data, I was making steady progress along County Road 44, covering ground at normal highway speed, but the landmarks outside my windows told a different story. The cattle in my trailer were getting more agitated. Normally placid during transport, they were now shifting restlessly, making low moaning sounds that indicated distress. Animals have instincts about dangerous situations that humans have forgotten. I keyed my CB radio. Breaker 19, this is Cattle Kate on County Road 44 in Illinois. Anyone else running this route? Static, then a voice I didn't recognize. Cattle Kate, this is Corn Hauler. I've been driving County Road 44 for, let me see, about 6 hours now? You just getting started? 6 hours. That was impossible. County Road 44 couldn't be more than 20 miles long according to my maps. Corn Hauler, what's your cargo? Load of grain from Decatur to Terre Haute. Should have been there yesterday, but I can't seem to find the end of this road. I looked ahead. The road stretched straight to the horizon, disappearing into a heat haze that shouldn't exist in October weather. Behind me, it extended just as far in the opposite direction. How many times have you passed the red barn? I asked. Red barn? You mean the one with the tobacco ad? stopped counting after 23. 23 times. He'd been driving the same loop for 6 hours, passing the same landmarks over and over without realizing what was happening. That's when I understood. County Road 44 wasn't a linear route from point A to point B. It was a closed loop, maybe 10 miles around, designed to trap vehicles in endless repetition. But understanding the trap didn't help me escape it. I tried turning around, but the road behind me looked exactly like the road ahead, same straight stretch of asphalt, same cornfields on both sides, same landmarks spaced at identical intervals. There was no beginning or end to County Road 44, just an eternal circle of agricultural monotony. My fuel gauge showed 3/4 full. It had shown the same reading for the past hour, despite running continuously, like the truck was trapped in a temporal loop as well as a geographical one. Cornhollow, you still there? Still here, Cattle Kate, still driving, starting to think this might be my new permanent route. More voices began joining the conversation, drivers who had been trapped on County Road 44 for hours, days, even weeks, all hauling different cargo to different destinations, all following the same endless loop through Illinois farmland. This is Produce Pete. Day 4 on County Road 44. Load of apples is starting to rot, but somehow my fuel never runs out. Furniture Frank here. Been following the same grain truck for 48 hours. Driver doesn't respond to CB calls anymore, just keeps driving. Chemical Charlie, week 2 on the loop. Starting to forget what the outside world looks like. I pressed harder on the accelerator, hoping speed might break the pattern. But even at 70 miles per hour, I passed the same landmarks in the same sequence at the same intervals. The red barn, the grain silos, the abandoned gas station, a farmhouse with a tire swing in the yard, a cluster of mailboxes at a crossroads that led nowhere. Over and over in perfect repetition. That's when I noticed the other trucks. They appeared in my mirrors, and ahead of me, other drivers trapped in the same loop, all maintaining the same speed, all following the same route. I could see them clearly, but somehow we never seemed to get any closer to each other. Like we were driving on parallel versions of the same road, separated by thin barriers of time or space. "Cattle Kate," a new voice crackled through the radio. "This is County Road Control. You need to listen carefully." County Road Control? Who is this? I'm like you, a driver who got trapped on the loop, but I've been here long enough to understand how it works. How long? Time doesn't mean much here. Could be months, could be years. But I've learned some things about County Road 44. I could see another truck ahead of me now, an older Peterbilt pulling what looked like a grain trailer. The driver was gesturing out his window, trying to get my attention. "The loop feeds on routine," the voice continued. "On drivers who stop thinking, stop questioning, just follow the road automatically. The moment you accept that this is normal, you become permanent." How do I break out? You have to do something unexpected, something that breaks the pattern. I thought about that. Every driver trapped here was following the same routine: drive straight, maintain speed, stay on the road. We were all behaving exactly as the loop expected. What would it not expect? The farmhouse with the tire swing was coming up again. This time, instead of driving past, I yanked the steering wheel hard to the right and drove straight into the front yard. My truck plowed through the wooden fence, scattering chickens and leaving deep ruts in the lawn. I stopped just short of the front porch, air brakes hissing as I came to a complete halt. For a moment, everything was silent. Then the world seemed to shiver, like a television screen adjusting its reception. The farmhouse flickered, becoming translucent. Through its walls I could see the real landscape, not endless cornfields, but rolling hills and mixed forest. I was in southern Indiana, exactly where I should have been according to my original route. The feedlot where I was supposed to deliver my cattle was visible in the distance, less than 5 miles away. County Road 44 had never existed. It was some kind of hallucination or temporal displacement that trapped drivers in false realities, making them believe they were driving when they were actually... what? sitting motionless somewhere, caught in a space. "Who is this?" I asked. "I'm you, Danny. Driving the same route, same cargo, same night, just earlier." I stared at the taillights ahead of me. Earlier when? 3 hours ago. When I first entered this tunnel. Before I understood what it really is. The tunnel walls seemed to be closing in, pressing against my truck from both sides, but that was impossible. The Eisenhower Tunnel is wide enough for 4 lanes of traffic. "What do you mean, what it really is?" Long pause, filled with static. Then, "It's not really a tunnel, Danny. It's a loop. A fold in the mountain where time gets twisted." I checked my watch. 11:47 p.m. The same time it had shown when I'd first entered the tunnel 20 minutes ago. "How long have you been in here?" "Hard to say. Time doesn't work right. Sometimes it feels like minutes, sometimes like hours. The ice gets thicker each time through." I looked down at the road surface. He was right. The black ice was getting worse, spreading up the tunnel walls like crystalline fingers reaching for the ceiling. "Each time through?" "You'll see. Just keep following my lights. And, Danny? Yeah, don't try to pass me, trust me on this one." The tunnel stretched ahead, impossibly long now. According to my GPS, I should have exited 5 minutes ago. But the road continued, curving slightly in ways I didn't remember from previous trips. The ice was everywhere now, coating the walls, hanging in sheets from the ceiling, turning the tunnel into a crystal cavern. And it was getting colder. Not just winter cold, but something deeper. Arctic cold that bit through my jacket and made my breath form clouds in the heated cab. "Danny, you still there?" My own voice crackled through the radio. "I'm here. What's happening to us?" We got caught in something, a temporal fold maybe, or just good old-fashioned mountain magic. The kind that traps travelers in places that exist between destinations. I tried to make sense of it. Time loops, impossible ice formations, talking to myself through a CB radio. None of it should be possible, but the evidence was right in front of me, literally in the form of my own taillights leading me through an endless tunnel that defied the laws of physics. Is there a way out? Maybe. I've been trying different things each time through. Different speeds, different routes within the tunnel, even stopping and walking. Nothing works. How many times have we been through this? The nation. Static, then I stopped counting after 15. 15 loops. Hours of driving the same impossible stretch of road, talking to different versions of myself at different stages of the journey. The thought made me dizzy. And when I saw the exit sign, it appeared in my headlights like a mirage. Exit 225, Georgetown, Silverthorne. The same exit I'd been trying to reach for what felt like hours. "I see the exit," I told my other self. "Don't get too excited. I've seen it too, 12 times, maybe 13. I followed the truck ahead toward the exit ramp, but as we approached, something strange happened. The exit began to fade, becoming translucent like a projection. By the time we reached it, there was nothing but solid tunnel wall. And then we were back at the beginning. "Welcome to loop number 2, my voice said through the radio. I looked around. The tunnel was exactly as it had been when I'd first entered, dimly lit, relatively clear of ice, seemingly normal, but now I knew what was coming. "Is this real?" I asked. "Are we really stuck here, or is this some kind of hallucination?" Doesn't matter, real or not, we're experiencing it, and experience is the only reality we have access to. The second time through, I paid closer attention to details. The way the ice formed in specific patterns, always starting in the same places. The way the tunnel walls seemed to shift and change when I wasn't looking directly at them. The way my fuel gauge never moved, despite the engine running continuously. "What's our cargo?" the other me asked as we passed the halfway point. "Computer equipment. You?" "Same. But I've been thinking about that. What if the cargo is what's trapping us? What if there's something in those boxes that doesn't want to reach its destination? I thought about the manifest I'd signed back in Denver. Standard electronics shipment, nothing unusual. But then again, how would I know if something unusual was hidden among the legitimate cargo? Third time's the charm, my voice said as we began loop number 3. This time, the ice formations were even more elaborate. Crystals that seemed to pulse with their own internal light. Formations that looked almost organic, like frozen trees or coral reefs, and the temperature dropped even further, so cold that frost began forming on the inside of my windshield. "Danny," the other me said urgently, "this time, when we get to the halfway point, I want you to stop. Get out and look at your trailer. In this cold, that's suicide." "Maybe, but I think it's the only way to break the cycle." At the halfway point, I pulled over. The truck ahead stopped too, and I watched my other self climb down from his cab. In the dim tunnel lighting, he looked exactly like me, but somehow thinner, more translucent. I opened my door and stepped into cold so intense it felt like being punched in the lungs. The air was so dry it crackled, and every breath sent ice crystals forming in my nose and throat. My trailer doors were standing open. That was impossible. I had checked them personally before leaving Denver, made sure they were locked and sealed. But now they hung open like a mouth, waiting to be fed. Inside, the trailer was empty. Not just empty of cargo, empty of everything. No tie-down straps, no load bars, no refrigeration unit, just an endless black void that seemed to extend far beyond where the trailer walls should be. "It's hungry," my other self said, appearing beside me. Up close, I could see through him like he was made of ice and starlight. "What's hungry?" "The tunnel. It feeds on travelers, on their destinations and purposes. It took our cargo first, then started working on us." I looked at him, this translucent version of myself, and understood. Each loop made us less solid, less real. Eventually, we'd fade away entirely, becoming just another set of phantom lights for future drivers to follow. How do we stop it? Give it what it wants, but not what it expects. He walked toward the open trailer and I followed. At the edge of the black void, he turned back to me. "I'm going to feed myself to it, all of my loops, all of my time, all of my purpose. Maybe that'll be enough to satisfy it and let you escape." Before I could protest, he stepped into the darkness and vanished. The trailer doors slammed shut. I ran back to my truck, the cold burning my lungs with each breath. Inside, I grabbed the CB radio. "Danny, you still there?" Silence. I started the engine and continued through the tunnel, but this time there were no taillights ahead of me. I was alone, following only my own headlights through increasingly treacherous ice formations. The exit sign appeared again, but this time it didn't fade. As I drove toward it, I could see actual light beyond, not the artificial glow of tunnel lighting, but real starlight and the distant sparkle of town lights in the valley below. I emerged from the tunnel doing 70 miles per hour, tires finding purchase on normal asphalt, temperature gauge returning to normal readings. In my rearview mirror, the tunnel mouth looked exactly as it should, well lit, clearly marked, completely ordinary. I completed my delivery in Salt Lake City, though I couldn't explain why my trailer was empty when I opened it at the warehouse. The receiving supervisor assumed there had been a paperwork error and sent me home with an empty trailer and half pay. But sometimes, late at night when I'm driving mountain passes, I tune my CB radio to unusual frequencies, and sometimes faintly, I can hear my own voice calling through the static. "Danny, you still there? This is Mountain Danny looking for a way out of the tunnel." I never respond. I learned my lesson about time loops and conversations with myself. But I always listen just in case that other version of me, the one who sacrificed himself to feed the hungry tunnel, finds a way to call for help. Some roads demand a toll, and sometimes that toll is paid by versions of yourself you'll never meet. Story 9. The Man in the Snow Who Never Dies. I'm Maria Santos, and I've been running freight through Canadian winter routes for 16 years. Seen every kind of weather, every type of hazard that snow and ice can throw at a driver. But the man I keep encountering on the Trans-Canada Highway defies every law of nature and survival. I know. First time I saw him was 3 winters ago, during a brutal February storm. I was hauling medical supplies to Winnipeg, fighting through wind and snow so thick I could barely see my own hood ornament. Temperature was minus 35, the kind of cold that'll kill you in minutes if your truck breaks down. That's when I saw him walking along the shoulder. No coat, no hat, wearing nothing but jeans and a flannel shirt. Walking through knee-deep snow like it was a spring morning. I pulled over immediately. In conditions like that, exposure kills faster than anything else. "Hey," I called out through my passenger window. "You need help?" He turned toward me and I got my first good look at his face. Middle-aged, maybe 50, with gray hair and kind eyes. But his skin had a bluish tint, and his lips were nearly black, classic signs of severe hypothermia. "I'm fine," he said, voice surprisingly strong, "just heading home. In this weather, you'll freeze to death." He smiled, and when he did, I could see his breath misting in the frigid air. "Can't freeze what's already frozen, miss." I insisted he get in the truck, but he politely declined and continued walking into the storm. I watched him disappear into the swirling snow, convinced I'd just witnessed someone's final moments. I called it in to the RCMP, gave them his description and last known location. They said they'd send someone to search, but in that weather, it would be hours before they could reach the area. 3 days later, I was running the same route in reverse. Perfect weather this time. Clear skies, good visibility, roads dry and safe. About 10 miles from where I'd seen the walking man, I passed a roadside memorial. Fresh flowers, recent construction, the kind of marker families put up when someone dies in a traffic accident. I slowed down to read the inscription. Robert Chen, 196522019, beloved husband and father, died walking home in the snow. The date was 3 days ago, the night I'd seen him. But that wasn't the end of it. 6 months later, I was running through the same area during another winter storm. Not as bad as the February blizzard, but still dangerous driving conditions. And there he was again, the same man, wearing the same clothes, walking through the same impossible cold. I pulled over again. "Robert, is that you?" He looked at me with those same kind eyes, now recognizing me. "Hello again, miss. Still trying to get home. But I saw your memorial. You died last winter." "Did I?" He seemed genuinely puzzled. "Doesn't feel like dying, just feels like walking." This time, I convinced him to get in the truck. The moment he climbed into the passenger seat, the temperature inside my cab dropped 20 degrees. Frost immediately began forming on the windows, and I could see my breath misting despite the heater running full blast. Robert didn't seem to notice the cold. He sat there in his thin clothes, looking perfectly comfortable, while I shivered in my heavy winter jacket. "Where exactly is home?" I asked. "Thompson, got a little house on Elm Street. Wife's probably got dinner waiting." Thompson was 40 miles north. In this weather, it would take him days to walk there. Days he wouldn't survive. But as I drove toward Thompson, Robert began to fade. Not disappearing exactly, but becoming translucent, like morning fog. By the time we reached the city limits, I could see through him to the passenger door. "This is my stop," he said, opening the door. "Robert, wait." But he was already gone, vanished into the swirling snow like he'd never been there at all. The only evidence of his presence was the frost coating the inside of my passenger window and the wet outline of a body on the seat. I found Elm Street and drove slowly, looking for his house. Number 47 had a "for sale" sign in the yard and newspapers piled up on the porch. The neighbors told me Robert Chen had died in a car accident the previous winter, trying to walk home during a blizzard. His wife had moved south to live with her sister. But Robert didn't know that. Every time the weather turned bad on that stretch of highway, he resumed his journey home, walking through snow that should kill him, driven by love and habit and the simple human need to return to familiar warmth. Over the past 3 years, I've encountered him 17 times. Always during winter storms, always walking north toward a home that no longer exists. Each time I offer him a ride. Sometimes he accepts, sometimes he declines. But he's always polite, always grateful for the concern, and he's always getting clearer. The first few times he looked like a man dying of hypothermia, blue skin, black lips, movements slowed by cold, but with each encounter he seems more solid, more present, like death is teaching him how to exist in the space between worlds. Last month, during the season's first major snowstorm, I saw him again. But this time was different. He wasn't alone. A woman walked beside him wearing a summer dress and sandals. She looked to be in her 70s with silver hair and a gentle smile. Like Robert, she showed no signs of distress despite the brutal conditions. I pulled over, and they both approached my truck. "This is my wife, Helen," Robert said proudly. "She decided to join me." Helen smiled and waved. "Lovely night for a walk, isn't it, dear?" I looked at this elderly woman, standing in 40 weather, wearing nothing but cotton and wondering if I was losing my mind. But her eyes were warm and alive, filled with the same contentment I'd seen growing in Robert over the years. "Are you both—" I could finish the question. It involved a concept I couldn't. "Dead?" Helen asked cheerfully. "Oh, yes, dear. Died last Tuesday. Heart attack in my sleep. But Robert's been telling me about these wonderful walks he takes, and I thought I'd try it myself." They continued north together, holding hands like newlyweds, leaving footprints in the snow that filled with fresh powder within minutes. I called the RCMP again, but they told me Helen Chen had indeed died the previous week. Natural causes, no signs of distress. Her funeral had been held 3 days ago, but apparently death wasn't going to stop her from joining her husband on his nightly walks home. I've started carrying extra emergency supplies, blankets, hot coffee, energy bars, just in case I encounter other winter walkers who don't realize they're beyond help. Because I'm beginning to understand that some people are so determined to reach their destinations that even death becomes just another obstacle to overcome. The Trans-Canada Highway stretches for thousands of miles through some of the harshest winter conditions on Earth. Every year, travelers get caught in storms, their vehicles break down, their journeys end in tragedy. But some journeys don't end, they just change form. Robert and Helen Chen walk through impossible cold toward a home that exists now only in memory. They're not suffering, not struggling against the elements. They're simply continuing a routine that death interrupted, but couldn't stop. And sometimes, on the worst nights when visibility drops to zero and the wind howls like a living thing, they're not alone. Other figures walk along the highway shoulders. Drivers who ran out of gas, passengers whose cars went off the road, hitchhikers who never reached their destination. All of them heading home through snow that can't touch them anymore. The living avoid winter highways when conditions get bad, but the dead? They just put one foot in front of the other and keep walking. Because some roads are traveled by more than just the living. and some destinations are worth walking toward forever. Story 10. Arctic Road Deliveries. Name's Jack Morrison, and I specialize in extreme weather deliveries. Been hauling supplies to Arctic research stations, remote oil rigs, and military installations for 12 years. Thought I knew what isolation meant until I took the contract for Station Echo. The job came through my usual broker, Emergency Medical Supplies, to a research facility in northern Alaska, coordinates placed at about 200 miles north of Deadhorse, which should have been my first red flag. There's nothing that far north except ice and darkness, but the pay was exceptional, enough to cover my expenses for 3 months, and the client was paying in advance, always a good sign. The supply list was strange, though. Along with standard medical equipment, they wanted me to haul a cargo container that couldn't be opened during transport, military-grade locks, temperature sensors that would trigger an alarm if anyone broke the seal. "What's in the container?" I asked the loading supervisor. "Above your pay grade," he said. "Just get it there intact and don't ask questions." I should have asked more questions. The drive north from Deadhorse took me beyond the end of any mapped roads, following GPS coordinates across frozen tundra marked only by occasional survey stakes. This wasn't ice road trucking. This was Arctic exploration, driving across landscape that looked like the surface of an alien planet. The first day went smoothly. Clear weather, solid ice, steady progress across the endless white expanse. But as I got farther north, things started feeling wrong. For one thing, my compass began spinning wildly, unable to find magnetic north. GPS signals became intermittent, cutting in and out like I was driving through some kind of interference field. For another, the aurora borealis appeared in the middle of the day, brilliant green curtains dancing across a sky that should have been showing normal winter sunlight, but the lights weren't behaving like normal aurora. They pulsed in regular patterns, almost like they were trying to communicate. On the second day, I reached the coordinates for Station Echo. There was nothing there. I double-checked my GPS, recalibrated my instruments, even got out and walked around looking for any sign of structures or human activity. But the location was completely empty, just endless ice stretching to the horizon in every direction. I tried my satellite phone to contact the client, static filled with sounds I couldn't identify, not quite voices, not quite music, but something that seemed almost intelligent. And that's when I noticed the tracks. They appeared in my headlights as the short Arctic day faded into night. Tire tracks in the ice, parallel to my own route but heading in a different direction. Fresh tracks, like another vehicle had passed this way within hours. I followed them. The tracks led northwest, toward a cluster of mountains that didn't appear on any of my maps. As I got closer, I could see lights among the peaks, not the yellow glow of electric lighting, but something blue-white and cold, like frozen fire. Station Echo sat in a valley between two glacier-covered ridges, looking exactly like what you'd expect from an Arctic research facility. Prefabricated buildings connected by enclosed walkways, satellite dishes, generators humming in the perpetual twilight. But something was off about the whole setup. The buildings looked too clean, too new, like they'd been constructed yesterday. And there were no footprints in the snow around the structures, no signs of human activity despite the obvious signs of operation. I pulled up to what looked like the main building and honked my air horn. A man emerged wearing Arctic gear and the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "Jack Morrison?" he asked. "Right on time." "Dr. Hansen?" I'd been given one contact name for the station. "That's right. We've been waiting for you." As I climbed down from my cab, I noticed something strange about Dr. Hansen. His breath wasn't misting in the 50 air. Mine was creating thick clouds of vapor, but he might as well have been breathing in a heated room. "Cold doesn't seem to bother you much," I said. "You adapt quickly up here. The human body is remarkably resilient when it has to be." He led me toward the cargo bay, but I stopped at my trailer to check the sealed container. The temperature sensors showed it had maintained proper conditions throughout the journey, and the locks were intact. "Wait, what exactly am I delivering?" Dr. Hansen's smile became more genuine. "Hope," he said. "You're delivering hope." Inside the cargo bay, a team of workers began unloading my trailer. They moved with mechanical precision, like they'd done this exact same procedure hundreds of times. But like Dr. Hansen, none of them showed any signs of being affected by the extreme cold. "How long has this station been operational?" I asked. "Time moves differently up here," Dr. Hansen said. "Some days feel like years. Some years feel like days." The same phrase I'd heard before, somewhere else. A phrase that seemed to follow me to the strangest places. After unloading, Dr. Hansen invited me inside for a meal before starting my return journey. The facility's interior looked like any modern research station. Computer workstations, scientific equipment, comfortable living quarters. But the people were wrong. Everyone I met had that same unnatural resistance to cold, the same mechanical precision in their movements. And their eyes. They all had the same expression of patient waiting, like they were expecting something that might happen in minutes or might take decades. "What kind of research are you conducting here?" I asked over dinner. "Adaptation studies," Dr. Hansen replied. "How humans can survive in extreme environments, how we might colonize places where normal life can't exist." Through the dining room windows, I could see the aurora dancing overhead with increased intensity. The lights seemed to be responding to something, pulsing in rhythm with the facility's generators. "The northern lights are beautiful tonight," I said. "Those aren't northern lights," Dr. Hansen said quietly. "Those are the test subjects." Before I could ask what he meant, the lights outside began to descend. Green curtains of energy settled over the facility like a living blanket, and suddenly I understood what was happening. The aurora wasn't natural. It was some kind of energy field, and the research station was at the center of it. The adaptation studies weren't about surviving extreme cold. They were about surviving exposure to whatever alien intelligence was using Earth's magnetic field as a communication network. The sealed container I delivered wasn't medical supplies. It was bait. Or maybe a communication device. Something to help establish contact with the intelligence behind the lights. "How long have you been in contact with them?" I asked. Dr. Hansen looked at me with something that might have been pity. "We're not in contact with them, Jack. We are them now. The original research team made contact 18 months ago. But human minds weren't equipped to handle direct communication with an intelligence that vast and alien. So what happened to them? Later adapted, we all adapted, became something that could survive in the space between human consciousness and cosmic awareness." I looked around the dining room. Everyone was staring at me with those patient, waiting eyes. Not hostile, but not entirely human either. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing," Dr. Hansen said. "You've already delivered what we needed. But we'd like to offer you something in return. Dilution, the chance to become something more than human, to join a consciousness that spans light years and sees time as a navigable dimension." The aurora lights were pressing against the windows now, and I could hear something like music in the facility's electrical systems. Not quite sound, but some form of communication that bypassed the ears and spoke directly to the mind. "And if I refuse? Then you drive home, file your delivery report, and collect your payment. But you'll always wonder what you missed. And eventually, curiosity will bring you back." I stood up from the table. "I think I'll stick with regular trucking." Dr. Hansen nodded, like he'd expected that answer. "The offer remains open. We'll always be here, and the lights will always remember you." I left Station Echo that night, driving south under an aurora that followed my truck for 50 miles before finally retreating to the northern horizon. My GPS worked perfectly on the return trip, and my compass found true north without difficulty. I delivered my final report and collected my payment, but the client company didn't exist in any business database, and the check was drawn on a bank that had been closed for 10 years. Yet somehow, it cleared without any problems. Sometimes, late at night when I'm driving through remote areas, I tune my CB radio to unusual frequencies and listen to the static. And sometimes, very faintly, I can hear Dr. Hansen's voice calling through the interference. The offer remains open, Jack. We're still here, and the lights still remember you. Never respond, but I always listen. Because somewhere north of Dead Horse, beyond the edge of any map, Station Echo continues its research into human adaptation and cosmic consciousness. And sometimes, when the aurora borealis is particularly active, I wonder what I might have become if I'd been brave enough to accept their offer. Some deliveries take you to the edge of the known world. Others take you beyond it. Story 11, Lost Convoy in a Blizzard. I'm Pete Williams, convoy leader with 24 years of experience moving hazardous materials across North America. Led hundreds of multi-truck operations through every kind of weather and terrain. But the convoy I lost in the Colorado Rockies that March still haunts my dreams. We were moving classified military equipment from Denver to a facility in Utah. 6 trucks, including mine, carrying components that required special handling and continuous escort. Standard procedure for this type of cargo. Maintain visual contact, radio check every 15 minutes, no deviations from the planned route. My team was solid, drivers I'd worked with for years, all with security clearances and experience hauling sensitive materials. Rodriguez in Truck 2, Kim in 3, Thompson and Martinez in 4 and 5, with Jackson bringing up the rear in Truck 6. The weather forecast called for light snow, typical spring conditions for the high country. But weather in the Rockies can change fast, and by the time we reached I-70 west of Denver, we were driving into the teeth of a major blizzard. Convoy leader, this is Truck 2, Rodriguez called on the radio. Visibility dropping fast out here. Should we find somewhere to hole up? I checked the weather radar on my GPS. The storm was massive, stretching across 3 states. We could either push through or risk being stuck for days. Negative, Truck 2. We maintain schedule, reduce speed, increase following distance, and stay tight on the radio. For the first 2 hours, everything went according to plan. We crawled through the storm at 25 miles, hazard lights flashing, maintaining radio contact every 10 minutes. The cargo was too sensitive to risk delays, and my team knew how to handle bad weather. Then Truck 3 disappeared. Convoy leader, I've lost visual on Truck 3, Rodriguez reported. Kim, you copy? Static. Kim, this is Convoy leader. Report your position. More static, then faintly. Convoy leader, this is Truck 3. I think I missed a turn somewhere, can't see any of you. I checked my mirrors. Trucks 4, 5, and 6 were still visible through the swirling snow, following in proper formation, but Kim should have been between Rodriguez and Thompson. Truck 3, stop where you are. We'll backtrack and find you. I can't stop. Kim's voice crackled through the static. My brakes aren't responding. And the road looks different. Different how? Long pause, then steeper. Like I'm climbing a mountain that wasn't there before. I pulled the convoy over and grabbed my GPS unit. According to the satellite data, Truck 3 was still with us. The tracking beacon showed Kim's position right where she should be in the formation. But we could all see she wasn't there. Trucks 4 through 6. Do any of you have visual on Truck 3? Negative, convoy leader, Thompson replied. Haven't seen her since we passed that last overpass. What overpass? Silence, then Martinez. The concrete bridge about 5 miles back. You drove under it too. I checked my memory of the route. There was no overpass on this section of I-70, just open highway cutting through mountain valleys. Convoy leader! Kim's voice came through with increasing urgency. I need help. The road is getting narrower and there are things moving alongside my truck. What kind of things? I don't know. Shadows maybe, or animals. They're keeping pace with me, but They're not leaving tracks in the snow. I made a command decision. All trucks, we're stopping here, hazards on, emergency positions, we're going to sort this out. But as I was pulling over, truck 6 vanished too. Jackson, report. Static. Then Jackson's voice, distorted by interference. Convoy leader, where did everyone go? I'm following tire tracks, but they're leading into... This can't be right. Into what, Jackson? Into a tunnel, a road tunnel that goes straight down into the mountain. I looked back at my remaining trucks. Rodriguez was still visible, along with Thompson and Martinez, but Jackson's position indicator on the GPS showed him directly behind us, even though his truck was nowhere to be seen. All remaining units, sound off. Truck 2, Rodriguez, I'm here. Truck 4, Thompson, still following you. Truck 5, Martinez, but I'm starting to lose radio contact with the others. No response from Kim or Jackson. Within the next hour, I lost Thompson and Martinez too. One moment they were visible in my mirrors, the next they were gone, vanished, into a blizzard that seemed to be selectively removing my convoy one truck at a time. Their voices continued coming through the radio, but their descriptions of the roads they were traveling made no sense. Thompson claimed to be driving through a forest of ice sculptures. Martinez insisted he was following a convoy of trucks that looked exactly like ours, but when he tried to catch up, they stayed always just out of reach. By the time I reached the Utah state line, only Rodriguez and I remained. Pete, Rodriguez said over the radio, using my first name for the first time in years. I need to tell you something. I don't think we're on the regular highway anymore. I looked around. The road looked exactly like I-70, complete with proper signage and mile markers. But Rodriguez was right. Something felt fundamentally wrong about our surroundings. What makes you say that? Check your fuel gauge. I looked down, still showing 3/4 full, exactly what it had read when we'd started the convoy 6 hours ago. And your clock. The dashboard clock showed 2:47 p.m., the same time it had shown when Kim first went missing. We're stuck in some kind of loop, Rodriguez continued, driving the same stretch of highway over and over while the storm picks off our convoy, one by one. As if summoned by his words, voices began coming through the radio. Kim, Jackson, Thompson, Martinez, all reporting their positions on impossible roads through landscapes that couldn't exist. I'm driving upside down, Kim said matter-of-factly. The snow is falling up, and my cargo has shifted to the roof of the trailer, following a convoy of ghost trucks, Jackson reported. They look real until I get close, then they turn transparent. Road signs, all in a language I don't recognize, Thompson added. But somehow I know they're telling me to keep driving. Found a truck stop, Martinez said. But when I went inside, it was full of drivers from convoys that disappeared years ago. They were all waiting for their loads to reach destination. I grabbed the CB radio. All trucks, this is convoy leader. We need to regroup and find a way out of this. Can't regroup, Kim replied. Every road leads somewhere different now. But Pete, I think I know what's happening. Go ahead, Truck 3. The cargo we're hauling, it's not military equipment, it's something else. Something that exists in multiple dimensions at once. I thought about the sealed containers, the unusual security requirements, the client's insistence on maintaining schedule regardless of weather conditions. What am I, something? I think it's a key, or maybe a doorway. And the storm isn't weather, it's a side effect. Reality gets thin when the cargo moves through normal space. Rodriguez's voice crackled through. That would explain why we're losing cohesion. The convoy is being pulled apart across different dimensional layers. So how do we get home? Long silence. Then Kim. Maybe we don't. Maybe this is home now. Driving forever through the space between realities. Delivering cargo to destinations that exist outside normal space-time. I looked at my GPS. Still showed us on I-70, but the landscape outside looked less and less like Colorado with each passing mile. The mountains were too sharp, too geometrically perfect. The snow fell in patterns that defied physics. Convoy leader, Rodriguez said quietly. "I can see lights ahead. Looks like our destination." I peered through the windshield. In the distance, barely visible through the unnatural blizzard, I could see the glow of what looked like a massive facility built into the mountainside. But this wasn't the Utah military installation we'd been contracted to supply. This was something else entirely. A complex that seemed to exist partially in our reality and partially somewhere else. "All trucks," I announced. "We're approaching destination. Maintain formation and prepare for delivery." One by one, their voices came back through the static. "Truck 2, understood. Truck 3, ready for delivery. Truck 2, approaching destination. Truck 5, cargo secure. Truck 6, convoy complete." We were together again, all 6 trucks, delivering our impossible cargo to a facility that existed in the spaces between worlds. The storm had tested us, separated us, and ultimately brought us to where we were supposed to be all along. Because some convoys carry more than just cargo, they carry reality itself, shifting the boundaries between what is and what could be. And some destinations can only be reached by getting lost first. Story 12. The Phantom Hitchhiker of Route 66. My name is Jake Martinez, and I've been hauling freight across the Southwest for 15 years. I thought I knew every mile of asphalt, every truck stop, every peculiar sight the desert could throw at me. That was before I picked up Emma on that October night outside Flagstaff. The weather had turned nasty. One of those sudden desert storms that come out of nowhere, turning the sky black and unleashing sheets of rain that make visibility nearly impossible. I was running late on a delivery of construction equipment to Phoenix. My rig loaded heavy with concrete mixers and steel beams that made every mile feel like crawling through quicksand. It was just past midnight when I saw her. She stood maybe 50 yards ahead on the shoulder, illuminated by my headlights like a ghost materialized from the storm. Young woman, maybe early 20s, wearing a light blue dress that seemed impossibly clean for someone stranded in the middle of nowhere. No jacket, no umbrella, just standing there in the pouring rain like it didn't exist. I should have kept driving. Every instinct I'd developed over the years on the road whispered that something wasn't right, but she looked so small against the vastness of the desert, so vulnerable in that storm. I eased my rig to a stop about 20 feet past her and waited. The passenger door opened with a metallic groan, and she climbed in without a word. No thank you, no explanation of how she'd ended up out there, just settled into the seat like she belonged there, water dripping from her hair onto the worn vinyl. "Where you headed?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual, despite the unease crawling up my spine. "Phoenix," she said quietly, staring straight ahead through the windshield. Her voice had a strange quality to it, distant, like she was speaking from the bottom of a well. I nodded and put the truck in gear. Phoenix was my destination anyway, so it worked out perfectly. Too perfectly, maybe. For the first hour, we drove in silence. The storm gradually weakened, the rain softening from a thunderous assault to a gentle patter against the windshield. I kept stealing glances at my passenger, trying to figure out what felt so off about her. She never moved, never shifted in her seat, never reached for the radio or adjusted the air conditioning. She just sat there, perfectly still, watching the road unfold in front of us with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "Nasty night to be stranded," I finally said, more to break the oppressive silence than from any real desire for conversation. She turned to look at me then, and I nearly swerved off the road. Her eyes were completely black, not just the pupils, but the entire visible surface. Like looking into 2 pools of motor oil. "I wasn't stranded," she said simply, then turned back to the windshield. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles going white. The rational part of my mind scrambled for explanations. Contact lenses, some kind of medical condition, the poor lighting in the cab playing tricks on me. but deep down, in that primitive part of the brain that our ancestors used to survive, I knew I was sharing my truck with something that shouldn't exist. The miles crawled by. The storm had passed completely now, leaving behind that crystal-clear desert sky where stars shine like scattered diamonds. But inside the cab, the temperature seemed to be dropping steadily. I could see my breath misting in the air, despite the heater running full blast. "Cold night," I muttered, more to myself than to her. "Is it?" she asked, and there was something almost amused in her tone. I hadn't noticed. I glanced at her again, still wearing that light summer dress, no goosebumps on her arms, no sign that she even registered the temperature that was making me shiver despite my heavy jacket. That's when I noticed we weren't alone on the road anymore. In my rearview mirror, headlights had appeared, a steady line of them like a convoy of trucks following us through the desert. But there was something wrong with the lights. They were too dim, too yellow, like the old sealed beam headlights they stopped using decades ago. I watched them for several minutes, expecting them to gradually gain on us or fall behind, the way traffic normally behaves. But they maintained the same distance, moving at exactly the same speed we were. When I slowed down to test my theory, they slowed down too. When I sped up, they matched my pace perfectly. "Friends of yours?" I asked Emma, nodding toward the mirrors. She didn't turn to look, in a way. The temperature in the cab dropped another few degrees. I could feel the cold seeping into my bones now, making my joints ache like I was coming down with the flu. My breath came out in thick white puffs, and frost was starting to form on the inside of the windows. "Listen," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "maybe I should drop you off at the next truck stop. Let you wait for another ride." For the first time since she'd gotten in, Emma smiled. It was not a comforting expression. "There won't be another ride," she said, "and there won't be a next truck stop." I looked ahead, straining to see through the darkness. Route 66 through this stretch of desert was dotted with truck stops, diners, and gas stations, places I'd stopped hundreds of times over the years. But the road ahead was completely empty, just an endless ribbon of asphalt disappearing into the night. That's when I realized I couldn't remember the last mile marker I'd seen, or the last exit sign, or any of the familiar landmarks that should have been passing by. It was like we were driving through a void, suspended between destinations on a road that had no beginning and no end. The convoy of lights in my mirror had grown larger, closer. I could make out the shapes of the trucks now, old Kenworths and Peterbilts from the 70s and 80s, their chrome dulled and their paint faded, but they made no sound. No rumble of diesel engines, no whistle of wind over their cabs. They followed us in complete, unnatural silence. "How long have you been out here?" I asked Emma, though I was beginning to suspect I already knew the answer. "Time works differently on the road," she said. "Sometimes it feels like forever, sometimes it feels like it just happened yesterday." I wanted to ask what had happened to her, how she died, but I was afraid of the answer. Instead, I focused on driving, on maintaining some semblance of normalcy in a situation that had moved far beyond normal. The fuel gauge hadn't moved in over an hour. Neither had the odometer. We were traveling but going nowhere, burning fuel that wasn't being consumed, following a road that existed in some space between the living world and whatever comes after. "Why me?" I finally asked. "Why tonight?" Emma turned those impossible black eyes on me again. "Because you stopped. Because you saw someone who needed help and you didn't drive past. That matters, even here." "Even where?" She gestured vaguely at the darkness surrounding us. "The space between places. The road that connects all roads. Most people drive right through without ever knowing it exists. But sometimes, when conditions are right, when the barriers are thin, someone gets pulled in." I thought about that storm, about how it had come from nowhere and vanished just as quickly, about how I'd felt compelled to stop for her, despite every instinct telling me not to. Am I dead? The question came out as barely a whisper. Not yet, Emma said, but you're close. Closer than you've ever been. In the distance, I could see lights approaching from ahead. More trucks, their headlights cutting through the darkness like the convoy behind us. We were being surrounded, enclosed in a procession of phantom vehicles on a highway that existed between worlds. What happens now? I asked. Emma reached over and placed her hand on mine where it gripped the steering wheel. Her touch was ice cold, but somehow comforting. Now you choose, she said. You can keep driving with us, become part of the convoy that helps others who get lost between places. Or you can find your way back to the world you came from. How do I get back? She smiled again, and this time there was genuine warmth in it, despite those black eyes. The same way you got here, by helping someone who needs it. I looked in the rearview mirror. The convoy was still there, but now I could see faces in the windows of the other trucks. Dozens of drivers who had made the same choice I was facing. Some looked peaceful, content with their eternal journey. Others looked lost, confused, still trying to understand what had happened to them. In the side mirror, I caught a glimpse of something else, a faint glow on the horizon behind us, like the lights of a distant city. Or maybe it was the sun beginning to rise, though time seemed meaningless in this place between places. The choice is yours, Emma said, squeezing my hand one more time before releasing it. But choose quickly, the barriers won't stay thin forever. I looked ahead at the road stretching endlessly into darkness, then back at that distant glow in the mirror. Somewhere in that light was my life, my route to Phoenix, my delivery of construction equipment, my small apartment in Tucson with its stack of unpaid bills and photographs of a family I barely saw anymore. But here, on this phantom highway, there was something else. Purpose, maybe. The chance to help other lost souls find their way. To be part of something larger than just hauling freight from point A to point B. The convoy was slowing now, the trucks behind us beginning to fade like mirages in the desert heat. Emma was becoming translucent, her form wavering like smoke. Choose, she whispered, her voice growing fainter with each word. I pressed harder on the accelerator, racing toward that distant glow, chasing the thin line between worlds that would take me back to the living. But even as I drove, I could feel the pull of the phantom highway, the temptation to turn around and join the eternal convoy of lost truckers who had chosen to help rather than return. The choice was mine to make, and I still don't know if I made the right one. Story 13, The Desert Car Trap. I'm Marcus Chin, and I've been hauling propane tanks across Nevada for 8 years. Never thought I'd be the type to believe in curses or supernatural nonsense. That changed on a scorching July afternoon when I encountered what locals call the car trap. The heat was brutal, 118 degrees according to my dashboard thermometer, the kind of desert heat that makes the air shimmer like water and turns your steering wheel into a branding iron. I was running medical oxygen to Las Vegas, keeping the AC cranked and staying hydrated like my life depended on it. That's when I saw the first car. A red sedan, maybe 15 years old, sitting perfectly positioned on the shoulder about a mile ahead. Hazard lights blinking steadily. As I got closer, I could see someone waving frantically from beside the driver's door, a middle-aged woman in business attire, clearly not dressed for a breakdown in the Nevada desert. I pulled over, air brakes hissing as I came to a stop. The woman approached my cab, shading her eyes against the sun. "Thank God," she called up to me. "My car just died. No cell service out here. Could you give me a ride to the next town?" Standard Good Samaritan situation. I'd done it dozens of times over the years, but something felt off. Maybe it was how perfectly positioned her car was, not the random angle you'd expect from a vehicle that had simply broken down. Or maybe it was how composed she seemed for someone stranded in triple-digit heat. "Sure thing," I said anyway. "Climb on up." She introduced herself as Linda Vasquez, claimed to be a real estate agent heading to Vegas for a conference. Normal conversation, normal concerns about being late for her meeting. But as we drove, I kept checking my mirrors, watching that red sedan shrink in the distance. 20 minutes later, I saw the second car. A blue pickup truck this time, also on the shoulder with hazard lights flashing. A man in work clothes standing beside it, waving for help. My passenger turned to look, and I swear I saw something flicker across her face. Satisfaction, maybe? Poor guy, she said. Desert's no place to break down. But I didn't stop. Something deep in my gut told me to keep driving, to ignore the man who was now gesturing more frantically as we passed. In my side mirror, I watched him throw his hat on the ground in apparent frustration. "Shouldn't we help him?" Linda asked, but there was no real concern in her voice. She was testing me. "I'll radio it in at the next truck stop," I lied. The third car appeared 40 minutes later. A white SUV with a family, mom, dad, 2 kids, all waving desperately as we approached. The father was holding up what looked like a cell phone, pointing at it and shaking his head to indicate no signal. Linda leaned forward, studying them intently. "They have children." The way she said it made my skin crawl, not with sympathy, but with something that sounded almost hungry. I drove past them too. By the time we reached the 5th stranded vehicle, a motorcycle with a rider in full leathers despite the heat, I was beginning to understand what was happening. Each breakdown was too perfect, too strategically placed, and Linda's reactions were becoming more obvious. She wasn't surprised by any of them. She was expecting them. "You're not really stranded, are you?" I finally asked. She turned to look at me with eyes that seemed darker than they had been when she'd first climbed into my cab. "Define stranded," she said. The temperature gauge on my dashboard was reading normal, but sweat was pouring down my face. Not from the heat, from fear. The kind of primal terror that comes when you realize you're trapped with something that's been pretending to be human. "What are you?" Linda smiled, and her teeth seemed too sharp, too numerous. "I'm exactly what I told you, a real estate agent. I deal in property acquisition." "What kind of property?" "The kind that comes with a warranty, a sole warranty." I pressed harder on the accelerator, but somehow we didn't seem to be going any faster. The speedometer showed 75, but the landscape outside was crawling by like we were doing 30. "The cars," I said. "They're all yours." "Props," she confirmed. "Set pieces, each one baited with exactly the right kind of desperation to make good people stop and help. The family with children works on about 60% of drivers. Single woman in business clothes is effective on about 40%. You're in the stubborn 10%. I grabbed for my CB radio, but when I keyed the mic, only static came out. Not the normal static of poor reception. This was different, like the sound of something breathing. "No one's going to hear you," Linda said pleasantly. "We're not exactly on the regular highway anymore." She was right. The road looked the same, felt the same, but I couldn't remember the last mile marker I'd seen, or the last exit sign. We were driving through a desert that looked like Nevada, but existed somewhere else entirely. "What do you want?" "I told you. Property acquisition. Specifically, I want the deed to your conscience." "My what?" "Your sense of right and wrong. That little voice that made you stop for me in the first place, even though your instincts were screaming not to. It's quite valuable in my line of work." The air in the cab was getting thicker, harder to breathe. My vision was starting to blur around the edges, and I could taste copper in my mouth. "What?" "Because people like you, the ones who stop to help, who go out of their way for strangers, you're becoming rare, extinct almost. And rare things are valuable." I could see more cars ahead now, dozens of them lining both sides of the highway. Every type of breakdown you could imagine, every combination of stranded travelers designed to appeal to different types of sympathy. Elderly couples, young mothers with babies, military personnel in uniform, teenagers who looked scared and lost, and standing beside each vehicle was someone waving for help, someone who looked desperate and grateful and utterly human. "They're all yours," I said. It wasn't a question. Business partners. Former drivers like yourself who decided to join the company rather than lose their souls entirely. It's not such a bad deal, really. Steady work, benefits, and you get to keep existing in some form. One of the stranded motorists waved as we passed, a young man in a military uniform standing beside a Jeep with a flat tire. But his eyes were the same impossible darkness I'd seen in Linda's, and his smile was too wide, too knowing. "How long have you been doing this?" "Time works differently out here. Long enough to build up a substantial client base." I looked at my fuel gauge, still showing 3/4 full, exactly what it had read when I'd picked up Linda. My watch had stopped at 2:47, frozen at the moment I'd agreed to help her. "The propane I'm hauling," I said, understanding flooding through me. "It's not really propane, is it?" Linda laughed, a sound like wind through dried bones. "Very good. It's compressed desperation, concentrated hopelessness. My employers have quite a use for it." The landscape outside was changing now. The desert was still there, but it was wrong somehow. The sand was too white, the rocks too perfectly shaped. The sun hung motionless in the sky, casting shadows that pointed in impossible directions. "I won't do it," I said. "I won't sign over my conscience or join your little collection of fake breakdown artists." "I was hoping you'd say that," Linda said. Her form was starting to waver now, becoming translucent. "It makes the acquisition so much more satisfying." I could feel something draining out of me, not blood, not energy, but something more fundamental. The part of me that felt compelled to help strangers, that made me pull over for someone in trouble despite my better judgment. It was being siphoned away like fuel through a punctured tank. But I had one advantage Linda hadn't counted on. 15 years of hauling dangerous cargo had taught me about emergency procedures. My hand found the valve release for the tank I was carrying, not compressed desperation, but real propane that could turn my entire rig into a fireball. "Do you know what your mistake was?" I gasped, fighting to stay conscious as my moral center dissolved. Linda tilted her head curiously. "You assumed I was carrying your cargo, but I haven't signed the paperwork yet." I yanked the emergency release. The explosion should have killed us both. Instead, I woke up 3 days later in a hospital in Reno, with burns I couldn't explain, and a story no one would believe. My rig was found intact at a truck stop 50 miles from where I remembered stopping, with the propane delivery completed and signed for by someone whose signature I didn't recognize. The doctors said I'd suffered from severe dehydration and heat exhaustion. Hallucinations were common in cases like mine. The police report listed it as a single-vehicle accident. Apparently, I'd run off the road, overcorrected, and knocked myself unconscious. But I know what really happened. And sometimes, when I'm driving through the Nevada desert on those blazing summer afternoons, I still see them. Cars broken down on the shoulder, people waving for help, looking desperate and grateful and utterly human. I don't stop anymore. I can't afford to. Because somewhere out there, Linda Vasquez is still in the real estate business, still acquiring property with sole warranties. And next time, she might not make the mistake of underestimating her cargo. The desert remembers everything, every good deed, every missed opportunity, every choice between safety and compassion. And it's always watching for the next driver who'll choose compassion. Story 14. Stranded on a salt flat. My name is Sarah Kim, and I thought I knew isolation. 23 years of long-haul trucking, most of it solo runs across the emptiest stretches of America. But nothing prepared me for what happened on the Bonneville Salt Flats last September. I was hauling electronics equipment from Sacramento to Denver, taking the northern route through Nevada and Utah to avoid some construction delays. The weather was perfect, clear skies, no wind, the kind of day that makes you grateful to be a trucker instead of stuck in some office queue. The truck started making noise around noon. Not the usual sounds you expect from a diesel engine. This was different. A grinding metallic shriek that seemed to come from somewhere deep in the transmission. I pulled over immediately, knowing that ignoring engine trouble in the middle of nowhere is a good way to end up stranded for days. But when I tried to restart after checking under the hood, nothing happened. Not even a click from the starter. The electrical system was completely dead. No dashboard lights, no radio, no CB, just silence. That's when I noticed where I was. I'd stopped right in the middle of the Bonneville Salt Flats, that vast expanse of crystalline white that stretches for miles in every direction. During speed trials, it's buzzing with activity, racers, spectators, support crews. But in September, it's empty. Completely, utterly empty. The silence was unnatural. No wind, no insects, no distant traffic sounds. Just the kind of absolute quiet that makes your ears ring and your heartbeat sound like thunder. I tried my cell phone. No signal. Which wasn't surprising. The Salt Flats are a dead zone for most carriers. But my satellite communication unit should have worked anywhere on Earth. It didn't. The display showed only static, like it was trying to connect to satellites that didn't exist. I popped the hood again, checking connections, looking for any obvious problem. Everything looked normal, but when I touched the battery cable, it was ice cold. Not cool, actually cold, like it had been in a freezer, in 90-degree weather. That's when I saw the footprints. They led away from my truck in a perfectly straight line, heading directly into the salt flats. Human footprints, but wrong somehow. Too deep for the firm salt surface, and they didn't follow the natural gait pattern you'd expect. They were precisely spaced, like someone had been measuring each step. More disturbing, they led both away from and toward my truck, a perfect line going out and another perfect line coming back, ending right at my driver's side door. I'd been alone when I stopped, I was certain of that. The sun was getting lower, and I knew I had maybe 6 hours before dark. Being stranded on the salt flats at night would be dangerous. Temperatures drop fast in the desert, and without shelter or heat, exposure could kill you. I decided to follow the footprints. The salt crunched under my boots as I walked, the only sound in that vast white silence. The prints were easy to follow, deep impressions in the crystalline surface that caught the afternoon light like scattered diamonds. But the farther I walked, the more wrong they seemed. For one thing, they never varied. No adjustments for rough spots, no deviations around obstacles. Just that same measured pace, step after step, heading toward what looked like a low rise in the distance. For another thing, they were getting fresher. I know that sounds impossible, but it's what I saw. The prints closest to my truck were weathered, partially filled with blown salt and debris. But as I followed them, they became sharper, clearer, like they'd been made only minutes ago. After walking for what felt like an hour, I reached the rise. It wasn't a natural formation. It was too regular, too geometric, more like a buried structure pushing up through the salt. At the top of the rise, the footprints stopped. Not at the edge, not at some obstacle. They just ended, like whoever had made them had simply ceased to exist at that exact spot. But there was something else, a perfect circle of darker salt maybe 20 feet across, with what looked like symbols or patterns etched into the surface. I knelt down to examine them more closely, and that's when I heard the humming. It was barely audible at first, more felt than heard, a low-frequency vibration that seemed to come from beneath the salt flat itself. As I listened, it grew stronger, and I could swear I heard voices mixed in with the sound. Dozens of voices, maybe hundreds, all speaking in a language I didn't recognize. The temperature began to drop. Not the gradual cooling you'd expect as evening approached, but a sudden, dramatic shift. My breath started misting, and frost began forming on the salt around the circle. In a matter of minutes, it went from 90 degrees to what felt like near freezing. I stood up, backing away from the circle. And that's when I saw them. Figures were emerging from the salt itself, rising up through the crystalline surface like swimmers surfacing from water. At first they were translucent, barely visible, but as they rose higher, they became more solid, more defined. They looked human, but wrong, too tall, too thin, with limbs that moved in ways human joints shouldn't allow. Their faces were pale and expressionless, with eyes that reflected the light like mirrors. And they were all wearing the same thing, coveralls with patches I recognized, trucking company logos, names embroidered over the pockets, DOT numbers on the sleeves. They were truckers, or had been once. The figures began to move, walking in that same measured pace I'd seen in the footprints. Some headed off in different directions, disappearing into the distance. But others came toward me, their mirror eyes fixed on my face with uncomfortable intensity. I ran. The salt was treacherous under my feet, slippery and uneven. Behind me, I could hear them following. Not running, just maintaining that same steady walking pace. But somehow they were keeping up with me, no matter how fast I moved. My truck appeared in the distance, looking impossibly small against the white expanse. But as I got closer, I could see something was wrong. There were more footprints around it now, dozens of sets, all leading to and from the driver's side door. The cab door was standing open. I slowed down, gasping for breath in the thin, cold air. The figures behind me had stopped walking, just standing in a loose line about 50 yards away, waiting. Inside the truck, I could see someone sitting in the driver's seat. It was me. Same uniform, same company patch, same face. But the eyes were wrong. They had that same mirror-like quality as the other figures. And there was something else, something that made my stomach clench with terror. The other me was smiling. I approached the truck slowly, every instinct screaming at me to turn and run. But there was nowhere to go. The salt flats stretched endlessly in every direction, and those figures were still watching, still waiting. "Hello, Sarah," the other me said in my own voice. "We've been expecting you." "What are you?" "I'm you, the version of you that belongs here, the version that understands what the salt flats really are." It gestured toward the white expanse around us. This isn't just a dry lake bed. It's a collection point, a place where lost travelers end up when they drive too far into nowhere. I looked around at the figures scattered across the salt. Up close, I could see the details, the company logos, the wear patterns on their clothes, the 1,000 small details that made them look exactly like working truckers. "We're all drivers who got stranded here," the other me continued. "Broke down, ran out of gas, took a wrong turn, and couldn't find our way back. The salt flats collected us, the way they collect everything else. Rain, water, mineral deposits, lost travelers. But I'm not stranded," I said. "My truck just needs repairs." "Your truck is fine, it always was. The breakdown was just the excuse the flats needed to bring you here." I looked at my rig. The engine was running now, dashboard lights glowing, looking exactly as it should. But somehow I knew that if I got in and drove away, I'd end up right back here within an hour. "This is your choice," the other me said. "You can keep fighting it, keep trying to leave, and eventually you'll die of exposure or dehydration. Or you can accept what's happened and join us, become part of the collection. What happens if I join you? You become a recruiter, help bring other lost travelers home. It's not such a bad existence. You get to keep driving, keep doing what you love. Just different routes." I thought about all the stranded motorists I'd helped over the years, all the times I'd stopped for someone broken down on a lonely highway. Had any of them been like this? Agents of some supernatural collection service, gathering drivers for the salt flats? How many of you are there? Hundreds, thousands, maybe. Every trucker who ever got truly lost ends up here eventually. The ones who drive the empty roads, the forgotten highways, the routes that don't exist on any map. The sun was setting now, painting the salt flats gold and orange. Beautiful and terrible at the same time. I need time to think about it. The other me nodded. Of course. But don't take too long. The flats get cold at night, and exposure kills faster than you'd think. She climbed down from the truck, and I got in. The engine started immediately, all systems showing green. But when I put it in gear and started driving, I could see in my mirrors that I wasn't getting any farther from the figures on the salt. I was driving in place, wheels spinning uselessly on a surface that should have provided perfect traction. Night fell quickly in the desert. The temperature plummeted, and I could see my breath misting inside the heated cab. Outside, the figures were still there, standing motionless in the moonlight, like an army of patient scarecrows. I tried the radio again. This time, voices came through. Other truckers reporting their locations, discussing weather and road conditions. Normal traffic. But when I tried to respond, no one seemed to hear me. Breaker 19, this is Moondog. I'm stranded on the Bonneville Salt Flats. Request assistance. Static. Anyone copy? I'm stuck out here with engine trouble. More static. Then a familiar voice. I copy you, Sarah. This is Sarah. I'm about a mile south of your position. I looked out the side window. In the distance, I could see headlights approaching. Another truck, identical to mine. It stopped about 50 yards away, and someone climbed down from the cab. Even in the moonlight, I could see it was me again. Another version, wearing the same uniform, walking with the same gait. She approached my truck and knocked on the window. Still thinking about it, she asked. I looked around at the salt flats, at the endless white expanse that stretched beyond my headlights, at the figures still standing motionless in the distance, at the other truck with its patient driver. How many of me are there? As many as it takes. Time works differently here. Every choice creates another possibility, another version of you that made a different decision. I thought about my life on the road, the long hours, the isolation, the endless miles of highway stretching from nowhere to nowhere. Maybe this wasn't so different. Maybe it was just another route to drive, another delivery to make. What about my family, my dispatcher? Won't they wonder what happened to me? They'll assume you died in an accident. Truck found burned out in a ravine, body never recovered. Happens more often than you'd think. The other me reached for the door handle. It's time to decide, Sarah. Join us willingly or let the cold make the decision for you. I looked at the fuel gauge. Still 3/4 full, exactly where it had been when I'd first stopped. My watch showed 11:47 p.m., but I could swear it had been showing the same time for hours. If I join you, do I get to keep my truck? Of course. You'll need it for the work. And I'll still be me? Still remember my life? You'll remember everything. But you'll understand it differently. See it as preparation for this. I opened the door and climbed down. The cold hit me immediately, cutting through my jacket like it was made of paper. All right, I said. I'll do it. The other me smiled. Not the unnatural smile from before, but something warmer, more genuine. Welcome home, sister. She reached out and took my hand. Her skin was warm despite the cold, and I felt something pass between us. Knowledge, understanding, acceptance. The figures on the salt flats began to move, walking toward us in that measured pace. But now I could see them clearly, recognize their faces. Truckers I'd known over the years. Drivers who'd disappeared on lonely highways. Friends who'd simply vanished without a trace. They were all here, all collected, all home. I climbed back into my truck, but it felt different now. The cab was warmer, more comfortable. The engine hummed with a sound I'd never heard before, not mechanical, but somehow alive. On my radio, I could hear the chatter of the collected drivers, reporting their positions across the salt flats, discussing the routes they'd traveled to find new additions to the collection. Moondog to base. I'm heading out on the northern route. Got reports of a breakdown near mile marker 47. Copy that, Moondog. Drive safe out there. I put the truck in gear and started driving. This time, the wheels found purchase, and I began moving across the salt toward the distant lights of the highway. Somewhere out there, another trucker was about to experience engine trouble. Another driver would find themselves stranded in a place between places, faced with the same choice I'd just made, and I'd be there to help them understand their options. The salt flats collect everything eventually: rainwater, mineral deposits, lost travelers, and now truckers like me who understand that some routes lead home in ways you never expected. Story 15. Voices in the Sandstorm. I'm Elena Vasquez, and I learned something about sandstorms that they don't teach in truck driving school. Sometimes the voices you hear in the wind aren't just your imagination. I was hauling construction materials to a job site near Yuma when the storm hit. Wall of sand 40 feet high, moving like a brown tsunami across the desert. I'd seen plenty of dust storms, but this one felt different. Alive somehow. Visibility dropped to 0 in seconds. I pulled over, hazards on, and settled in to wait it out. That's when I heard them voices in the wind, speaking just above the howling sand. At first, I thought it was my radio, picking up distant transmissions, but the words were too clear, too close. "Elena," a woman's voice called. "Elena, can you hear me?" I knew that voice. It was my sister Carmen, who died in a car accident 5 years ago. "Don't listen to them," another voice warned. "They're not real. Keep your doors locked." This voice I didn't recognize, but it sounded urgent, desperate, like someone trying to save me from something terrible. The storm raged for 3 hours. During that time, I heard dozens of voices. Family members, old friends, people I'd known and lost over the years. They all wanted the same thing: for me to step outside, to join them in the sandstorm. "It's beautiful out here, Elena," Carmen whispered. "No pain, no sorrow, just peace in the eternal wind." But that unknown voice kept warning me to stay inside, to ignore the tempting calls of the dead. When the storm finally passed and I could see the road again, I found deep scratches around my truck's door handles, like dozens of fingernails had been trying to claw their way inside. I made my delivery and never spoke about what happened. But now, whenever I see a sandstorm approaching, I hear that warning voice in my head. "Keep your doors locked, Elena. Keep your doors locked." Story 16. Cabin by the logging route. Name's Bill Thompson. I haul timber through the Pacific Northwest, know every logging road from Oregon to Alaska. But there's one cabin I'll never stop at again, no matter how tired I get. It was during a late-night run through the Cascade Mountains, delivering lumber to a mill in Yakima. The route takes you through some of the darkest, most isolated forest in the country, the kind of woods where you can drive for hours without seeing another soul. Around midnight, I spotted the cabin. Small log structure just off the road, warm yellow light glowing in the windows. A hand-painted sign read, fresh coffee, hot meals all night." After 8 hours of mountain driving, that sounded like paradise. The woman who answered the door looked to be in her 60s, wearing an apron and flour-dusted hands. "Come in, honey," she said. "Got fresh biscuits in the oven and coffee that'll wake the dead." The cabin's interior was exactly what you'd expect. Knotty pine walls covered with old photographs, a stone fireplace crackling with burning logs, the smell of home cooking filling the air. 3 other truckers sat at a long wooden table, eating and laughing like they'd known each other for years. But something felt off. The photographs on the walls all showed the same woman, the cook, but spanning decades. In some, she looked exactly as she did now. In others, taken what appeared to be 40 or 50 years ago, she looked identical. Not younger, identical. "How long have you been running this place?" I asked. "Oh, time's funny up here in the woods," she said, setting down a plate of biscuits and gravy. "Some days feel like years. Some years feel like days." I ate quickly, paid, and headed for the door. But as I was leaving, I glanced back at those other truckers. They were still eating, still laughing, but their eyes were completely black, not the pupils, the entire visible surface, like looking into pools of motor oil. I drove straight through the night, not stopping until I reached Yakima. When I called my dispatcher to report the unusual stop, he checked the route maps. "Bill, there's no cabin on that logging road. Hasn't been any structure there for 30 years. Used to be a restaurant back in the 80s, but it burned down. Killed 6 people, including the owner, woman named Martha Henderson." I went back a month later, in broad daylight. Found the foundation of an old building grown over with moss and ferns. But on the stone steps, still warm despite the cold mountain air, sat a plate of fresh biscuits. Martha's still cooking for drivers on that lonely road, still welcoming tired truckers into her warm cabin that exists somewhere between the living world and whatever comes after. I just won't be one of them. Story 17, Midnight Hauler in the Pine Forest. Dave Mitchell here, refrigerated transport specialist. 20 years of hauling perishables coast to coast, but nothing prepared me for the night I encountered the midnight hauler. I was running frozen foods from Portland to Denver, taking the scenic route through Idaho and Colorado. Mountain driving in November, not ideal, but the pay was good and I needed to make my delivery window. Around 2 a.m., somewhere in the Sawtooth National Forest, I caught sight of taillights ahead. Another trucker, running the same route. In those lonely mountain passes, seeing another driver is oddly comforting, like having company on the edge of the world. I tried to raise him on the CB, Channel 19, the standard frequency. "Eastbound rig about a mile ahead, this is Frosty Dave, you got your ears on?" Silence. I tried Channel 17, then 20, nothing. But I could see his running lights clearly through the trees, maintaining the same speed about a quarter mile ahead. Standard configuration? Seemed like an older Peterbilt, running dark except for the required DOT lighting. For 3 hours we drove like that. Him leading, me following, neither of us varying speed or stopping. It was almost hypnotic, just the steady rhythm of diesel engines echoing off the canyon walls, the sweep of headlights through endless pine trees. That's when I noticed something strange. My truck's temperature gauge was climbing, not overheating exactly, but running hotter than normal, despite the freezing mountain air. But the truck ahead, his exhaust stack wasn't producing any visible vapor. No steam, no condensation, nothing you'd expect from a diesel engine in sub-freezing temperatures. I grabbed my binoculars and focused on his rig. What I saw made my blood run cold. The truck was there, solid, real, casting shadows in my headlights, but through the rear window of his cab, I could see stars. Not a reflection of the night sky above us, but actual stars, like I was looking through empty space. Breaker 19, mysterious eastbound rig, please respond. This time, something came back through the static. Not words exactly, but a sound like wind through pine branches. Or maybe breathing. We reached a steep downgrade, the kind where you gear down and ride your engine brakes to avoid burning up your friction brakes. But the truck ahead didn't slow down. If anything, he seemed to accelerate, taking the curves at speeds that should have sent him tumbling into the canyon. I lost sight of him around a hairpin turn, but when I came around the bend, his taillights were waiting for me. Stopped dead in the middle of the road. I hit my air brakes, sliding to a stop about 50 yards behind him. But as I watched, his running lights began to dim, fading like dying stars, until the road ahead was completely dark. I sat there for 10 minutes, engine idling, trying to understand what I'd just seen. Finally, I drove slowly forward to where his truck had been. Nothing. No tire marks, no sign that a vehicle had ever been there, just empty asphalt and the endless pine forest pressing in from both sides. But in my side mirror as I drove away, I caught a glimpse of taillights following at the same distance he'd maintained ahead of me. When I stopped to look back, they vanished. I made my delivery in Denver without further incident, but when I checked my logbook later, I found an entry I didn't remember making. following midnight hauler through sawtooth forest. ETA unknown. Time moves differently in the pines. The handwriting was mine, but I have no memory of writing those words. Now, whenever I drive through mountain forests at night, I keep my CB tuned to Channel 19 and my eyes on the road ahead. Because sometimes, on the loneliest stretches of highway, that mysterious eastbound rig appears in my headlights, still running dark, still maintaining that same steady distance, still leading drivers like me toward destinations we never intended to reach. Story 18. Something in the Foggy Hills. The name's Rebecca Stone, and fog doesn't usually bother me. 28 years of hauling freight through every kind of weather, I've seen it all. But the fog in the Appalachian Hills that October night was different. It moved wrong, thought wrong. I was running medical supplies from Nashville to Richmond, taking the mountain route to avoid interstate construction. These old state highways wind through some of the most isolated country in America. Places where civilization feels like a distant memory. The fog rolled in around 11 p.m., thick as cotton, and glowing pale green in my headlights. Within minutes, visibility dropped to maybe 10 feet. I slowed to a crawl, hazards flashing, following the yellow line like a lifeline through the murk. That's when I started seeing the shapes. At first I thought they were trees or rock formations, just dark silhouettes in the swirling mist. But they moved. Not swaying in the wind, but deliberately, purposefully, pacing my truck as I crept through the hills. I tried the CB radio, static filled with what sounded like whispers in a language I'd never heard. When I adjusted the squelch, the whispers became clearer, more urgent, but still incomprehensible. The temperature inside my cab began dropping despite the heater running full blast. My breath misted, and frost formed on the inside of the windshield. But outside, the fog grew thicker, more luminescent, like it was generating its own cold light. Around midnight, I saw the hitchhiker. He stood perfectly still on the shoulder, barely visible through the green-tinged mist. Tall, thin, wearing what looked like an old-fashioned suit. His thumb was out, but there was something wrong with the gesture, too stiff, too formal, like someone mimicking human behavior without understanding it. I drove past, without stopping, but in my rearview mirror I watched him turn and begin following my truck. Not running, not even walking quickly, just that same steady pace, somehow keeping up with my 25-amp crawl through the fog. More figures appeared, dozens of them, standing beside the road or emerging from the tree line, all wearing similar outdated clothing, all with that same unnatural stillness, broken only by their mechanical thumb gestures. They were hitchhikers, but hitchhikers from when? The clothes looked like something from the 1940s or 50s, and their faces? What I could see of them through the mist were gray and expressionless, like old photographs come to life. My truck's engine began to sputter, not mechanical failure, but like something was interfering with the fuel system. The RPMs fluctuated wildly, and warning lights flickered across my dashboard. The fog pressed closer, seeming to push against my windows with physical weight, and through the swirling mist I could see them more clearly now. The hitchhikers. They were all around my truck, walking alongside it, keeping perfect pace despite my erratic speed. One of them approached my driver's side window. Up close I could see his face clearly. Gray skin stretched tight over sharp bones, eyes like black holes in his skull. When he smiled, his teeth were yellow, and far too numerous. He raised one skeletal finger and tapped on my window. Tap. The sound echoed inside my cab like gunshots. With each tap, more of them gathered around my truck, pressing close, their faces inches from the glass, all tapping in perfect unison. Tap, tap, tap. I floored the accelerator, but the truck barely responded. The engine coughed and wheezed, struggling against some invisible resistance. The speedometer showed 40 mph, but it felt like I was barely moving. The hitchhikers kept pace effortlessly. That's when I realized what they wanted. They weren't trying to get a ride to somewhere. They were trying to take me somewhere. Somewhere in the fog-shrouded hills where time moved differently and the rules of the living world no longer applied. I grabbed my emergency flare gun from under the seat and fired it out the window. The red light cut through the fog like a blade, and for a moment the hitchhikers fell back. But the flare died quickly, swallowed by the unnatural mist, and they resumed their positions around my truck. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time felt elastic in the fog, stretching and compressing without pattern. My fuel gauge hadn't moved. My clock had stopped at 12:34, and the temperature display showed readings that couldn't exist. 40 degrees in one spot, 150 in another. Then, suddenly, the fog began to thin. Like a curtain being pulled back, it retreated to the tree line, revealing clear mountain roads stretching ahead. The hitchhikers faded with it, becoming translucent shadows before disappearing entirely. I was alone again, driving through normal October night under a star-filled sky. My delivery reached Richmond on schedule, but when I checked my logbook, the time between entering and leaving the fog was missing. 3 hours gone without a trace, as if that section of highway existed outside normal time. I filed a report with my dispatcher about unusual weather conditions, but I never mentioned the hitchhikers. Some experiences are too strange to share, too far outside normal reality to expect anyone to believe. But sometimes, when I'm driving through mountain country and see fog rolling in, I take a different route. Because somewhere in those Appalachian hills, they're still waiting by the roadside. Still thumbing for rides to destinations that exist only in the mist, still tapping on windows with skeletal fingers, inviting drivers to join them in their endless journey through the fog.